Chapter 824. Jiang Hai wasn't very interested in Korean stuff. He didn't like girl groups, Korean dramas, and so on. Especially some Korean stars who insulted China. Jiang Hai naturally disliked them even more. He used to be one of the keyboard warriors who crusaded against these people on the internet. But it was impossible for him to stop so many people from liking him. Especially some brainless little girls and middle-aged and elderly women. Thinking back, when Jiang Hai's grandmother was still alive, she especially liked to watch Korean dramas because she liked to watch those Zhang family and Li family short stories. Later on, when he went to school, one of his roommates especially liked those Korean girl bands. Of course, he wasn't a true fan. If he counted, he was probably a true fan of the legs. The dance of the Korean girl bands, hee, you know. That era seemed to be the era of thighs, oh no, the era of ants, the era of young girls. It was the most popular time. In Jiang Hai's dormitory when he went to school, every day was despicable, 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 or oh, so Jiang Hai also heard some of it. He wasn't the kind of person who would stop others from liking something he didn't like. From what he had seen and heard, he also knew about this group. But to be honest, he had also seen the music video, but he couldn't tell who those people were at all. At most, he could tell their height, their hair color, and so on. As for the resemblance, well, Jiang Hai could only laugh. Not all South Koreans had undergone plastic surgery. Just like how there were good people in Japan, there were also good people in South Korea. However, it was difficult to distinguish them. Oh, it's good that you know, it's good that you know. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Li Shihui couldn't help but wipe his sweat and then laughed a few words. For him, as long as Jiang Hai knew, this was the most important thing. After that, he stopped talking and picked up his phone to send a text message. On the other side, Cheryl Lee was introducing Seoul to Jiang Hai. Since Jiang Hai said that he wanted to stay here for a few days, he naturally had to go to those scenic spots. Cheryl Lee was also introducing him to Seoul. There weren't many places to play in Seoul. Their first choice was those palaces and the like. However, Jiang Hai and the others had been to the imperial capital's Forbidden City before. What's so fun about Seoul? Next was Letian World. This was an amusement park, so Jiang Hai wasn't interested in it. South Hill Park is a sacred place for couples in Seoul. But Jiang Hai only feels that it is a place for couples. However, since they were already here, it was impossible for them to not go anywhere. Although they looked down on this country, they couldn't just not go anywhere since they were already here. Therefore, Jiang Hai was still discussing with Cheryl Lee where they should go to play these few days. Soon, the motorcade arrived at the Shilla Hotel in Seoul. The Shilla Hotel was a hotel under the Seoul Samsung Group. It was one of the top 2 hotels in Korea. The only one that could compete with it was the Lotte Hotel in Busan. I won't introduce the Shilla Hotel here. Anyway, for Jiang Hai, this was just a way to make up the word count. The current plot was quite smooth, so he was too lazy to use these things to make up the word count. It was easy to interrupt the flow of the plot. The car stopped in front of the Shilla Hotel, and a special doorman came to open the door. Then, Jiang Hai and the rest went directly to the elevator and went to the room specially prepared for them in South Korea. Jiang Hai lived in a suite with South Korean characteristics. This was a 5-bedroom room. 3 of the rooms were occupied. Each room had a separate bathroom, an independent air conditioner, a TV, and a small balcony. There were also 2 rooms. One was a study room, and the other was a game room. There were a lot of game consoles and the like. Jiang Hai's master bedroom was quite big, but what surprised Jiang Hai was that there was no bed in the master bedroom. South Korea and Japan were very similar in one thing. Although they both learned from Wuxia, they liked to sleep on rice. A house with South Korean characteristics and naturally needed to sleep on rice. Once the quilt was spread out, the entire room would be a bed. This made Jiang Hai very surprised and happy. Originally, he was thinking that if he and the 4 girls did it together, if the bed was too small, then they wouldn't be able to move around freely. But now, the whole room was their battlefield. After taking a look, Jiang Hai also felt that this thing was quite novel. After walking around the room, he left the room. This suite was specially prepared for him, Azalina, Galina, Wallace, and Cheryl Lee. Naturally, the others couldn't stay here. They had their own guest rooms on the same floor, so it was quite convenient. After everyone had settled down, Jiang Hai, Azalina, and Cheryl went to participate in the banquet prepared by Li Shihui. As for Hua Lizi and Galina, they had to decorate their rooms. They couldn't trust anyone else. As for Jiang Hai and the others, they went to the banquet hall specially prepared by Shilla Hotel. Jiang Hai's subordinates naturally had their own banquet, while Jiang Hai and the others sat alone in a large room. This restaurant, which seemed to be able to seat about 20 people, only had Jiang Hai and the others. Jiang Hai and the other 2 people brought by Li Shihui. For this meal, Jiang Hai and the others paid attention to the dining system. In other words, Jiang Hai and the others each had a long table in front of them. After they arrived, Li Shihui clapped his hands to signal that the dishes were served. Then, many waiters came in and placed all kinds of dishes in front of Jiang Hai. This is our country's national cuisine. This is our country's unique handing food. In ancient times, it was exclusively for the monarch's palace cuisine. Later, it was liberalized, and it was relegated to the scholar officials class. Recently, we have democracy, so this way of eating is also widely spread among the people. However, the average civilian eats 3, 6, 9, and 12. What we are eating now is the highest grade of Chuanzhou handing food. There are 18 kinds of kimchi, 6 kinds of seafood, 6 kinds of meat, 6 kinds of vegetables, and 6 kinds of fruits. Please taste it well. Looking at the dishes here, Li Shihui also put on a smile and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also picked up his chopsticks and glanced at the dishes that were being served. There were indeed many types of dishes, but the portions, Jiang Hai was sure that as long as he opened his mouth a little wider, he could eat a portion in one bite. After the dishes were all served, it was indeed a big table, but to be honest, Jiang Hai didn't feel that there was anything vulgar about it. He picked up his chopsticks and picked a few to take a look. Basically, he knew everything on the table. On the periphery were 18 kimchi. It had to be said that the southern Gauls really liked kimchi. Speaking of Korean kimchi, the first thing that came to mind was spicy cabbage. This was a necessity. The spicy cabbage was the most eye-catching. At the same time, there were 3 types of kimchi. The spicy cabbage that Jiang Hai was more familiar with was the spicy cabbage, the pickled cabbage, and the red soup cabbage. Next, there were pickled cucumbers, pickled radishes, pickled pickles, 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 pickles, carrot pickles, and so on. As for the seafood, Jiang Hai didn't have much of an appetite. Crabs and soy sauce and live octopus. Other than that, there was a grilled fish, a stewed fish, a bowl of seafood soup, and a spoon. There were 6 types of seafood. Among the 6 types of meat, 5 of them were grilled meat. There was grilled marble beef, which seemed to be the legendary Korean beef. There was also grilled pork belly, grilled pork, grilled steak, grilled lamb chops, and stewed beef. These were 6 types of meat. Lastly, the vegetables and fruits were all stir-fried. Those dishes were mainly used to wrap the grilled meat. Other than that, there was a small bowl of rice. This was the so-called Korean cuisine. Looking at the food in front of him, Jiang Hai felt that the former king of Wuxia had a tough life. This kind of food, although compared to the Wuxia's emperors, it was still far from being comparable to the Wuxia's ministers and rich people. But to be honest, Jiang Hai was treating them to the best food here. Although he was used to eating the beef, fish, pork, and vegetables he grew, he didn't feel like eating them. But if it wasn't too strange, he would still eat it. Thinking of this, he also moved his chopsticks, wanting to make do with the food and then go back to rest. However, just as he was about to start eating, someone knocked on the door of the private room. After getting permission, the door opened, and 2 women appeared outside the private room. Their breathing was obviously a little messy. When they saw the situation inside the private room, they couldn't help but let out a long sigh. "We're really sorry, we're late because we had a job." Looking at Li Shihuai, the 2 immediately bowed 90 degrees, and then said with a serious face. Although Li Shihuai was like a grandson in front of Jiang Hai, in South Korea, except for a few people, everyone else was a grandson when they saw him. For example, the 2 people in front of him. "Oh, it's okay. Come, let me introduce you. This is Jiang Hai, Mr. Jiang, a distinguished guest of our country." Hearing these 2 people, Li Shihuai nodded lightly, then took the initiative to stand up and introduce Jiang Hai, who was sitting in the main seat. "Mr. Jiang, hello, Smita. We are girls' generations Kim Taeyin, Lin Yun, Smita. Please take care of us." Hearing Li Shihuai's words, the 2 women were also very sensible. They immediately bowed to Jiang Hai and then said seriously. But Jiang Hai was a little confused. He was confused, naturally not because he saw his idol and didn't know what to do, but because he didn't understand. Chapter 825. Mr. Jiang is from Wuxia, not Korea, so you can speak Chinese or English to him. Seeing Jiang Hai's confused look, Cheryl Li also came over and translated into his ear. As for Li Shihuai, he immediately explained to the 2 puzzled women. After hearing this, the 2 women revealed a look of understanding, but then their faces became a little embarrassed. All right. Let's go. Let's go. Because in their group, some of them learned Chinese, some of them were good at English, and many of them came back from the United States. But the 2 of them were born and raised in South Korea. The so-called Chinese and English were only limited to introducing themselves. For general conversations, English was fine, but they almost couldn't speak Chinese. The most important thing was that everyone in South Korea knew it. The English they spoke may not be understood by foreigners because the accent was indeed a little strange. "Hello, my name is Kim Taeyin, Lin Yun, we are from girls' generation." Looking at Jiang Hai, the 2 had to bite the bullet and introduce themselves with a serious face. Listening to their stiff Chinese, Jiang Hai also nodded. "Oh, I see, hello." Glancing at the 2, Jiang Hai also nodded and said in English. Hearing Jiang Hai's reply, the 2 were relieved, and then nodded again as a return of courtesy. "Mr. Jiang Hai is a very important friend of our country. Because he doesn't know much about our South Korean culture, the only people who know are you. In order to get closer to him, he specially asked the 2 of you to help communicate. I think your company should have made it very clear." Hearing their words, Li Shihuai also said seriously. Hearing his words, the faces of the two were quite distressed. In fact, they really didn't want to come. What bridge of communication and so on, do you really think they don't understand? They are already in their 20s, almost 30. They knew better than anyone else what they were doing here. They were just here to drink with him. As for what they would do after drinking, that would depend on Jiang Hai's mood. Thinking of this, the two of them could not help but feel a little sad. After all, they were no longer so-called trainees. Although they were no longer at their peak, they were still at their peak. They had a large number of fans all over the world. However, South Korea's idol economy was like this, especially the girl groups. They were people who relied on youth to make a living. The entire South Korea market was only so big. When you were old and could not attract the mainstream group of 16 or 17-year-old girls, other girl groups would naturally rise up and become the new A-list idols. As for people like them who had once been glorious, it was inevitable that they would be pushed back. However, to be honest, the two of them did not mind being pushed back because they had already considered the problem of the future when they were glorious. Currently, the two of them were solo and their results were not bad. The other one specialized in acting. She originally wanted to develop the distant mainland of Wuxia, and did well in the early stages. However, after Wuxia recently issued a ban on South Korean stars, the acting girl's life instantly became difficult. However, based on what they had accumulated in the past, they did not have to worry about not being able to make money at all when they went for commercial performances. At most, they would earn less than in previous years, that was all. Therefore, even if there were some people who needed to entertain in the management company, even if they were domestic high-ranking officials, they could completely ignore them. However, today was different because Li Shihui had used the face of South Korea to find their company. If they did not come or angered these people, it would not just be a matter of being banned from the entertainment industry. Especially Li Shihui in front of them. As he said just now, he was a grandson in front of Jiang Hai, because Jiang Hai could ask him for $100 million at any time, but in the eyes of outsiders, he was a grandfather. This was an existence that could not be disobeyed. After receiving the text message, the company's representative even specially called the higher-ups. After all, they still had face. However, the higher-ups actually said that if Jiang Hai took a fancy to them, it would be their blessing. They could become the bridge between South Korea and Jiang Hai. That could not be better. After learning that the higher-ups meant this, the representative gave up and had no choice but to send them over. Because if they did not comply, they might face more than just being kicked out of the entertainment industry. Yes, we understand. Hearing Li Shihuai's words, Kim Taeyen lowered her head helplessly. They definitely had to come, but they were unwilling to give themselves up like this, but what could they do? They could only take one step at a time. Thinking of this, she could only bite her lip and say in a deep voice, "Come, sit next to Mr. Jiang Hai." Hearing her words, Li Shihui couldn't help but smile, then motioned for them to sit over. Hearing Li Shihuai's words, the two slowly walked in, then knelt on both sides of Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai was also a little confused when these two suddenly sat next to him. However, Jiang Hai understood what this guy meant, but was he so easy to get rid of? "I think Mr. Li, are you misunderstanding something? I don't have high paraplegia, so I don't seem to need others to feed me." Looking at the two people sitting on both sides, Jiang Hai also chuckled, then picked up the teacup in front of him, took a sip of tea, and said to Li Shihui. He didn't buy it. Although a dragon's nature was something. But that was only when something was about to happen. Now, two people were suddenly stuffed to him, and he didn't know who they were. How could Jiang Hai feel anything? No, I didn't mean that at all. I asked these two to come here mainly because you don't know much about our country, so it's easier to communicate with two people who you know a little about. At the same time, I can see that you don't know much about our food, so I need someone to introduce you. This is Miss Cheryl Lee. At first glance, I can tell that she has been abroad for a long time. She may not have the ability to do so. Seeing Jiang Hai say so, Li Shihuai immediately said. But when he said the first half of the sentence, he found that Cheryl Li wanted to refute him, so he immediately said the next sentence to block her words. Seeing that Cheryl Li didn't speak, Jiang Hai also glanced at Li Shihuai, then nodded. He naturally understood what this guy wanted to do, but he didn't need to object, right? Jiang Hai also looked at the two people beside him. One of them was small, and the other had long black hair. As for whether they looked alike, Jiang Hai didn't comment. Although a dragon's nature was something, it was impossible for him to go berserk with such thick clothes. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't object, Li Shihuai also gestured to the two people. Seeing Li Shihuai's gaze, the small one picked up the teacup and poured water for Jiang Hai, while the long black hair picked up the lettuce and wrapped it up for Jiang Hai. But when Jiang Hai saw the thing she wrapped up, he, who originally didn't have much appetite, lost his appetite even more. He saw that this woman had put whole cloves of garlic, perilla leaves, barbecued meat, rice, chili, grilled fish, and live octopus on top of the rice. She then mixed it with some barbecued meat sauce. Just like that, she was done. Although Jiang Hai wasn't a person who was obsessed with food, he didn't pay attention to the color, smell, and taste of food. After all, his favorite northeastern stew wasn't good-looking, but what the hell was this? It was an insult to the darkness to call it dark cuisine. Wait a minute, this thing? How do you eat it? Jiang Hai waved his hand to stop the person from feeding him and asked her. Just eat it like this. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the woman froze for a moment. She blinked her big eyes and looked at Jiang Hai innocently. Looking at her, Jiang Hai really choked. Just eat it like this? Try it and let me see. Looking at her, Jiang Hai said to her. Oh. But it could be seen that she didn't seem to hear the dissatisfaction and ridicule in Jiang Hai's words. Instead, she directly stuffed the vegetable bun into her mouth. Then, as if she had eaten something delicious, she narrowed her eyes and made a sound of N. What the hell is this? Looking at her, Jiang Hai was completely confused. How can that thing be delicious? He didn't read much, so don't lie to him. Cough, that's how we eat in South Korea. Looking at Jiang Hai's face that was filled with a blank 13, Cheryl Li awkwardly said. To be honest, when she came back a few days ago, she was also very surprised, but this is indeed how South Koreans eat this thing, it just looks a little scary. Hee, you guys eat it yourselves. I'll just eat something casually. I don't have the habit of being fed by others. Looking at the two, Jiang Hai said awkwardly. Then, he picked up a bowl of rice, dipped the roasted beef in barbecue sauce, and ate it just like that. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two people here also glanced at Li Shihuai. How could Li Shihuai not see it at this time? Jiang Hai didn't like to eat these things. After reviewing this failed dinner party in his heart, he continued to say something with a smile. After the two saw that Li Shihuai didn't stop them, they also ate some things. To be honest, the meal prepared by Li Shihuai could definitely be regarded as the top delicacies in South Korea. No matter what the arrangement will be later, these two people have to eat until they are full. Especially the long straight black hair over there, the speed and appearance of eating scared Jiang Hai. Have they not eaten for a long time? Chapter 826. The dinner ended quickly. Jiang Hai got up and nodded at Li Shihuai, then returned to his suite with the other two. Jin Taiyan and Lin Yun, who had been eating just now, seemed to have realized that they weren't here to eat. For a moment, they were a little dazed. You two, come out with me for a moment. Looking at the two in front of him, Li Shihuai said with a cold face. Then, he led the two out of the room, to the elevator door, and found a place where they couldn't see each other. I think your superiors have already told you why you're here this time, right? The two people on the other side, one was guarding the elevator, and the other was guarding the front. Li Shihuai looked at the two people in front of him with a serious face. Yes, when we came, the representative accompanied us to eat with a guest. Hearing his words, Jean Taiyan braced herself and said. Hearing her words, Li Shihuai's face turned even uglier. Eat? Do I need you to eat with me? You're here to sleep with him. Don't say you don't know what this means. Hearing Jean Taikai's words, Li Shihuai directly interrupted her and roared at them in a low voice. We don't want to do this. Glancing at Li Shihuai, Jean Taiyan said with a little stubbornness. Now, it's not a matter of whether you want to or not, but a matter of whether you have to do this. This is a mission given to you by the higher-ups of South Korea. Do you know who that person is? He's Jiang Hai. If you watch the news, you should know that our country recently detained a plane of that person, and the beef on the plane is worth $100 million. $100 million, do you understand what that means? That kind of chilled beef is guaranteed to last for 7 days. Today is already the 3rd day. In other words, we still have 3 days to transfer the beef to him. Otherwise, we don't have to pay $100 million, $100 million. Looking at the two people in front of him, Li Shihuai was already a little hysterical. He absolutely couldn't accept this. Of course, in his words, he also changed the fact that he had to pay $100 million to the country. $100 million? Hearing the words of the person in front of them, Kim Taeyin and Lin Yuner were a little dazed. 120 billion won, oh my god, that man just now didn't seem to be such a powerful existence. Let me tell you, you can accompany him. This is your good fortune. That guy has a manor that earns him more than $2 billion a year from raising cattle, which is 2.4 trillion won. He earns about the same amount from selling fish, and now he's also selling grass. His annual income is definitely more than $6 billion. Because his company and manor are both private, Forbes can't estimate his net worth. But according to the evaluation of people in our country, as long as his manor continues to operate, his net worth can already be in the top 10 in the world. Letting you serve him is a chance for you to think about your future while he knows about you. Li Shihuai tugged at his tie. Obviously, this guy was very familiar with using the method of giving a slap and then giving a sweet date. He used both soft and hard methods. But we. Hearing Li Shihuai's words, the two women looked at each other. Although they really didn't expect Jiang Hai to be such a rich person, they still couldn't accept offering themselves like this. Bullshit. Let me tell you, I don't care what method you use. Tomorrow, you must let me see him at the negotiating table. You must. This is a political task. If you can't complete it tomorrow, you will not have a place in South Korea. No, not only you, but also your family and friends will not have a place in South Korea. Whether you will exist in the Han River depends on whether you can run away or not. Do you understand? When Li Shihuai heard that the two people in front of him were still hesitating, he instantly became furious. He grabbed their hair and roared with a face full of anger. Hearing Li Shihuai's roar, the two people were completely scared silly. However, they knew that this was not a threat, nor was it a threat. It was a notice. If they did not do as they were told, then they really would not have any foothold in South Korea. This guy in front of them had this ability and also had this ability. He was a man of his word. You guys stay here and watch them. If they don't do as I say, you know what will happen. Letting go of the two's hair, Li Shihuai snorted coldly and said to the two people next to him. After hearing Li Shihuai's words, the two nodded seriously and then stood there. Looking at the appearance of the two, Kim Taeyin and Lin Yun understood that this time, they couldn't escape. In a country like South Korea, those rich people, trainees, or small celebrities, this could be said to be a very obvious thing. But they were different. From the moment they entered the company, they were the company's cash cow. Although they experienced some bad things later, such as the Black Sea incident, they had always been in the company's plan. Therefore, the company protected them very well in this aspect. After they became popular, naturally, no one dared to come over and ask them to do anything. Although their popularity had dropped now, no one could threaten them because they had grown wings and had money now. It was very difficult for topics like being banned from the entertainment industry to affect them. It could be said that except for the top existence in South Korea, no one could control their existence. But it was different now. Because now it wasn't those people who controlled them. Even though the Samsung Lee family had always joked that South Korea was the Samsung Lee family's South Korea, the Samsung Lee family didn't dare to go against the government in politics. It was even more impossible for them. Now, the whole of South Korea needed Jiang Hai's help. In the information they investigated, it was said that Jiang Hai was very fond of women. How could they not take advantage of it now? Under Li Shihuai's gaze, the two had no choice but to do it even if they didn't want to. They walked toward Jiang Hai's private room while looking back repeatedly. Now they were really scared and didn't have their own opinions, but what could they do? Uni, I'm scared. Lin Yuner, who was usually a carefree person, was also a little panicked at this time. However, she didn't realize that Jean Taiyen was even more panicked. She didn't know if it was because of the makeup or something else, but her face had become even paler at this time, almost drained of blood. However, they still had to walk step by step toward Jiang Hai's room. It wasn't a long road. They walked for about 15 minutes before reaching it, but they still felt that the road was too short. After reaching it, they glanced at the distance. The two people were still guarding there. They had no choice but to use their trembling right hands to gently knock on the door in front of them. After a long while, the door opened. The foreign woman they saw just now appeared in front of the door. After seeing them, she frowned first, then relaxed. Obviously, she also understood the purpose of the two people here. Cam Wang. She waved to the two people. The woman walked in first, and the two women also walked in slowly, looking back 3 times with each step. Then they closed the door and stood timidly at the door, looking around in horror. Why are you here? At this moment, the door of Jiang Hai's master bedroom opened. Jiang Hai, who had just taken a shower, walked out in a bathrobe. When he saw the two people, Jiang Hai was stunned. Ugh. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two people were also stunned. How should they say it? They had never experienced it before. This is a gift from Li something today. Don't tell me you can't tell. At this time, Cheryl Li also walked out of Jiang Hai's master bedroom in a bathrobe. When she looked at Jean Taiyen and Lin Yuner, there was a trace of ridicule on her face. She was also present at the banquet just now. She naturally knew that the purpose of these two people here was nothing more than to serve Jiang Hai. I can see it, but I don't understand their expressions because their faces clearly say, I don't want to. Since they don't want to, why are they here? Hearing Cheryl Li's words, Jiang Hai shook his head, sat on the sofa in the living room, and then looked at the two people in front of him with some doubts. Not everyone in this world is as rich as you. There are some things that you can't do if you don't want to, right? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl also walked to Jiang Hai's side with a smile, then sat on Jiang Hai's lap. At the same time, she winked at the two people, which was also a declaration of sovereignty. Sir Li said that he hopes that you can participate in the negotiation tomorrow. Hearing Cheryl's words, Jean Taiyen and Lin Yuner were about to cry. They looked at Jiang Hai with a pitiful expression. Fortunately, they still remembered why they came. If Jiang Hai was a good person and easy to talk to, perhaps they didn't need to do that kind of thing. But it was a pity that their thinking was still too simple. If Jiang Hai was really a good person, there wouldn't be such a scene now. I don't plan to go to the negotiation tomorrow. My plane has a total of 30 tons of beef. The wholesale price is about $20 million, and the profit price is about $40 million. But if I leave it there and let it rot, I can get $100 million. Even if I don't get 100 million, I'm confident that I can at least earn 80 million. Excluding legal fees and my own expenses, I still have a net profit of $30 million. Tell me, what reason do I have to give up this money? Shaking his head, Jiang Hai said calmly to the two people. And after hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two people's faces turned even uglier. Chapter 827. In fact, the best way to slap Jiang Hai's face right now was to directly ask, "Is this a lot of money? We'll give you the money." But unfortunately, these two couldn't say it out loud. $1 is equivalent to 1,200 Korean won. 30 million, that's 36 billion Korean won. What does 36 billion mean? Li Shengji has been popular for several years. His total net worth is 5 to 6 billion Korean won, and this is his own. In other words, the money he earns is shared with him and his company. Under such circumstances, he only has this much money. Girls' Generation was indeed very popular a few years ago. Although Jiang Hai didn't know, they were still very popular in Asia. After changing the contract, they earned a lot. But before that, they divided it among 9 people. Before that, it was reported that they could earn 30 billion Korean won a year. But the contract with South Korea's management company, even if it was divided according to 30%, 10 billion Korean won for 9 people. That's more than 1 billion Korean won per person, and they still have to pay taxes. From 2009 until the large-scale exposure of relationships in 2014, they were considered a top girl group. They had made a fortune for 6 years. So after so many years, they could be considered as their own real estate. It was already not bad for each of them to have a net worth of nearly 10 billion Korean won. Now that Jiang Hai was talking about 36 billion Korean won, they really couldn't take out that much money. And even if they can afford it, they may not be willing to do so. They worked so hard to earn so much money. Do they want to go back to square one? They looked at each other. Their eyes were full of helplessness. Is there no room for negotiation? We don't have that much money. Looking at Jiang Hai, Kim Taeyin finally gritted her teeth and said helplessly. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai smiled, and Cheryl Lee also smiled. You say that you don't have the money, and you're not going to do anything. What makes you think you can make Jiang Hai give in? It's really funny. Looking at the two people in front of her, Cheryl Lee said with a funny face. Hearing Cheryl Lee's words and recalling Li Shihuai outside the door, the two were really speechless. They must make a decision. If this matter was not settled, then what Li Shihuai said outside might become true. Their careers and the safety of their families were placed in front of them. This really made them feel that they had no choice. The conversation between them was in Korean, so Jiang Hai couldn't understand it at all. He just stood there and watched them talk. If Jiang Hai knew what they were talking about, he would probably laugh. He wasn't the kind of person who would give face and earn 30 million less just because of 2 artists. After all, he wasn't their fan. If something really happened between them, to be honest, it would be troublesome. This was because Jiang Hai didn't want to give up the money, and he didn't want to eat it all. Even if he didn't want to, he would still feel distressed. However, Cheryl Lee didn't know what Jiang Hai was thinking, and Azalina wouldn't say it. If Chi Jia and the others were here, they would definitely understand Jiang Hai's thoughts, but Cheryl Lee couldn't. Her acquaintance with Jiang Hai was actually a misunderstanding. After all, she wasn't Jiang Hai's woman, but Prawalton's. Oni. Hearing Cheryl Lee's aggressive words, Lin Yun couldn't help but panic. She looked at Jean Tian and said nervously. She wasn't alone now, she still had her boyfriend. It was really a coincidence. Her boyfriend was Li Shengji, who offended Jiang Hai at the airport today. But now she didn't know about this. She only knew that she wanted to keep her job, protect her family, and not betray her boyfriend. So now she was a little panicked. She couldn't help but hold Jean Tian's hand and whisper. Looking at her deer-like eyes that were about to cry, Jean Tian sighed helplessly. In fact, she also had a boyfriend before, although that boyfriend was more of a hype than a relationship. But after all, she had also invested a little in that relationship. However, they had separated a few days ago. Now, she was alone. If sacrificing herself could save her career, her family, and Lin Yun, then she, thinking of this, Jean Tian gritted her teeth and slowly took a step forward. She looked at Jiang Hai and Cheryl in front of her. I can, please let Yun, go. She has a better future, Anne. Looking at Jiang Hai and Cheryl Lee in front of her, Jean Tian bit her lips and said. Now they couldn't avoid it, so she was ready to sacrifice herself. Oni, you can't. Seeing Jean Tian was ready to sacrifice herself, Lin Yun panicked and immediately pulled her back. This won't do. You two came in, and only one of you expressed sincerity. What does this mean? But it was a pity that the loving scene between the two sisters had touched Cheryl Lee's heart. She wouldn't let them off easily. She let out a cold snort and said to them calmly. Upon hearing Cheryl Lee's words, the two of them couldn't help but tremble. If you don't want to, the door is behind you. Jiang Hai won't force you to do anything. Seeing the two stunned girls, Cheryl Lee couldn't help saying with a chuckle. Hearing her words, the two girls knew that they had no way out. I hope you can keep your words. After thinking for a while, as if she had made up her mind, Lin Yun, who had been hesitating just now, bit her lips and took a step forward. Then she took off her coat and began to unbutton her shirt. Looking at her tearful gaze, Jean Tian seemed to have sensed her will. Gritting her teeth, Jean Tian also took a step forward and began to take off her coat. Looking at their movements, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. I didn't say I wanted them to do this. Looking at the firm gaze of the two, Jiang Hai immediately asked Cheryl Lee. I thought you liked them. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee was also stunned. How about I tell them to stop? Looking at the two grief-stricken women over there, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but smile brightly. Then, she whispered to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai curled his lips helplessly. The two of them were about to be naked. If Jiang Hai were to say that he was just teasing them, wouldn't that be nonsense? Looking at Jiang Hai's gaze, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but smile awkwardly. It seemed that she was thinking too much. $30 million in profit. She also knew that this wasn't a small amount, but fortunately, Cheryl Lee's mind worked quickly. The only thing she could do now was to properly train them and let Jiang Hai feel that the $30 million were worth it. At this moment, the two on the other side had also finished their preparations. Then, two naked figures appeared in front of Jiang Hai and Cheryl Lee. However, they were both blocking their private parts. Their faces were also red as they looked into the distance. It had to be admitted that perhaps because of their years of dancing, their figures were really good. The girls in Jiang Hai's manor also had good figures. Compared to them, these two weren't inferior at all. Next, here's the chance to show your sincerity. Do whatever I do. Looking at the two people in front of her, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but smile. Then, under Jiang Hai's puzzled gaze, she knelt down in front of him and took out the thing that Jiang Hai couldn't describe before swallowing it. Seeing this scene, the two people couldn't help but breathe heavily. They had never experienced such a thing before. This kind of thing. Oh my God. Next, it's your turn. After about 5 minutes, Cheryl Lee raised her head again and said to the two in front of her. Since they had already made up their minds, under Cheryl Lee's urging, the two slowly walked over and knelt in front of Jiang Hai. Jean Taiyan opened her mouth and finally put her mouth on it in shame. But as soon as she touched it, she turned her head and lay on the ground. Although Jiang Hai had just finished bathing, she couldn't bear the smell. Oni. Looking at Jean Taiyan's appearance, Lin Yun's tears finally couldn't help but flow down. But she still put her mouth on it and took the initiative to swallow it. The taste instantly made her want to vomit, but she endured it. Don't just stand there, use your tongue flexibly. You're really stupid. And you, don't just stand there and spit. Come here, these two things are yours. Looking at the two people in front of her, Cheryl Lee loudly said. Why don't we just forget about it? Upon hearing Cheryl Lee's words, the two of them shuddered and moved closer to her. Jiang Hai also saw the resistance in their eyes and couldn't help but say. Alright, let's just forget about it. How can we forget about it? This is $30 million. Just enjoy it. Listen to me today. Tomorrow, I'll arrange some fun things for you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee also knew that she was wrong, so she said to Jiang Hai. Now, all she could do was to make Jiang Hai as happy as possible. We can't forget about it. It's already like this. If we forget about it, we. What are we? Remember what you promised us. Hearing the conversation between the two, Jean Taiyan also raised her head at this moment and looked at Jiang Hai. A trace of determination flashed in her eyes, and then she took the initiative to lean on him. For them, since they had made up their minds to take this step, there was no turning back. Looking at their eyes, Jiang Hai didn't know what to say now. Chapter 828. The autumn sunshine of South Korea shone through the thick curtains into Jiang Hai's bedroom. Feeling the sunshine, Jiang Hai also opened his eyes in a daze. Compared to the jet lag of most people, Jiang Hai was fine. When he opened his eyes, he also saw the women lying in his arms on both sides. These two women were the ones who made up their minds last night. Looking at the makeup on their faces that was ruined by tears, Jiang Hai also let out a sigh of relief. It seemed that he did not control the power from the primitive world last night. These two girls should have been tormented quite badly. After stretching his neck, Jiang Hai slowly pulled his arms out from under their necks, then took his clothes and left the room. After closing the door of the room, Jiang Hai couldn't help but scratch his head with a headache. To be honest, Jiang Hai was not interested in them at first. In fact, until now, he still couldn't remember their names. Originally, this matter was very simple. Jiang Hai didn't care who took the money from South Korea. He was determined to take the money. This was also the price they had to pay for detaining his plane. But now, after last night's incident, Jiang Hai really couldn't say anything. After all, he was not the kind of person who was so heartless that he would turn his face away after doing something. Therefore, he was definitely going to lose this money. Although he didn't care much about the 30 million, he still felt some heartache when talking about it. You're up. Watching Jiang Hai leave the room, Cheryl Lee, who had gotten up early, was sitting on the sofa in the living room at this time, watching a Korean drama. When she heard the sound of Jiang Hai opening the door, she also looked at Jiang Hai and said apologetically. She knew that because of her, Jiang Hai lost a lot yesterday. Although she had tried her best to make Jiang Hai happy last night, compared with real money, the bodies of the three women didn't seem to be worth it. Oh, what are you looking at? After rubbing his hair, Jiang Hai put on his clothes and sat next to Cheryl Lee. He was not in a hurry to wash up. He wanted to talk to her first. I didn't see anything. I'm sorry about last night. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee decided to apologize to Jiang Hai. It's okay, forget it. After all, I also got some benefits. If you really feel guilty, then take me out to play today. Looking at Cheryl Lee in front of him, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee was relieved. As long as Jiang Hai didn't blame her, that was the best. I've already made the arrangements. We'll go to the South Gate first, then to Jingfu Palace, and then to Qinghua Terrace. If there's still time, we'll go to Ming Cave. After dinner, we can go to Nanshan. It's very nice to take the cable car there at night. Then, I'll organize a party at Baoting. There are many beautiful women there, Cheryl Lee said immediately after hearing Jiang Hai's words. It could be seen that she really wanted to take Jiang Hai out to play. At this moment, the door to Azalina's room opened, and 3 people walked out. We're going out to play in a while. Are you coming too? Looking at the 3 people here, Jiang Hai asked them. Let Azalina protect you. We won't go. After all, you're not that popular here. When you go out to play, try to be careful. Don't go to places with too many people. Azalina looked at Jiang Hai and said calmly. This was not because they were looking for excuses or because they were angry. It was because this was their working state. Jiang Hai knew very well that he was not that popular in South Korea. The pressure on the shoulders of these 3 people was still very heavy. Okay, we'll do as you say. By the way, tell them in a while that we'll contact the people of South Korea to negotiate today. Also, if the 2 women in the room have any requests, try to satisfy them if it's not too troublesome. Jiang Hai was a person who always paid attention to an equivalent exchange. Although the 2 women accompanied him yesterday because of the pressure from above, it was still not enough. But after all, something had happened between them, so Jiang Hai couldn't say much. However, it was not his character to completely ignore them. Although he didn't even know the names of the 2 women, it didn't prevent him from giving more instructions. We got it. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Azalina also said something. After that, Jiang Hai went to wash up. After washing up, he, Cheryl, and Azalina went to the hotel's breakfast restaurant to have breakfast, then borrowed a hotel car to leave the hotel and go out to play. As one of the most luxurious hotels in Seoul, the Shilla Hotel naturally had many luxury cars. But for Jiang Hai, those luxury cars were not necessary, so he just borrowed a modern jeans and left. The price of this car in China is more than 300,000 yuan. It's not very eye-catching on the streets of South Korea. Cheryl Lee drove the car, took Jiang Hai and the others out of the hotel, and went to the place she booked. Less than half an hour after they left, the 2 women in the room also woke up. When they opened their eyes, they saw each other and saw the sadness, despair, and shame in each other's eyes. The 2 of them still had some memories due to the strange state of their bodies and the fragments of what happened last night. However, to them, these memories were nothing but humiliation. The atmosphere in the room was extremely oppressive for a moment. More than 10 minutes passed unknowingly. Kim Taeyin sat up first and then began to put on her clothes. Lin Yuner saw this scene and also put on her clothes. The 2 quietly put on their clothes. After everything was done, they opened the door and walked out. As soon as they walked out, they saw Huali fiddling with the computer in the distance. Oh. You're awake. Seeing the 2 get up, Huali also smiled and said to them. Oh, hello, where are they? Seeing Huali ask them, the 2 immediately nodded. Although they were not used to it, she still wanted to ask. After all, they didn't accompany them for nothing last night. Oh, they have already gone out, but you can rest assured. Jiang Zhou told us that the people in the team are already in contact with the higher-ups of South Korea. Hearing her words, Huali on the other side also said. That's good. Hearing Hua Lizi's words, the two women breathed a sigh of relief. As long as Jiang Hai kept his word, their sacrifice was not in vain. Thinking of their family and career, losing some other things was also acceptable. Although it may become a permanent pain in their hearts. You have to be more open-minded. In fact, Jiang Hai is still a very good person. He also specifically told us that if you have any requests or troubles, you can tell him and he will help you solve it. Here, this is his phone number. If there is anything, you can contact him at any time. Looking at the two in front of her, Huali also handed over 2 business cards and said with a smile. After receiving the business cards, the two really didn't know what to do. This night, was it just for this thing? Thinking of this, the two couldn't help but smile bitterly, but they still put away the business cards, then nodded, put on their shoes, and left the hotel. When they got into the elevator, the two women were a little numb. Jean Taeyin was okay, she was just very sad, but Lin Yuner was still a little numb because she didn't know how to face her lover. She felt very dirty now, but in order to save her job and her family, she had to do this. Looking at her grief-stricken face, Jean Taeyin sighed. She didn't know how to persuade her at this time. Things had already happened. The only thing they could do was to forget this as soon as possible. After all, Jiang Hai wouldn't stay here for long. As long as this matter was over, everything would be over. But there were many coincidences in the world. He wasn't someone you could just pass by if you wanted to. After learning that he had offended Jiang Hai yesterday, Li Shengji used all his connections and finally found out that Jiang Hai was staying at the Shilla Hotel. So he came here early this morning to wait for Jiang Hai, hoping to please Jiang Hai so that Jiang Hai wouldn't hate him. Unfortunately, he didn't come at the right time. Jiang Hai just left in the morning. When he wanted to ask Jiang Hai's floor in the lobby, the elevator just reached the first floor. When the two women saw Li Shengji in front of them, the two women were stunned. Li Shengji was also stunned. Early in the morning, his girlfriend's hair was a little messy, and her clothes weren't very neat. Li Shengji wasn't a child. Suddenly, he felt that he seemed to be a little green. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't know about this. Because after he ordered this matter, according to his thoughts, he shouldn't meet with the two women again. So he was still very happy in Seoul. Jiang Hai went to the scenic spots mentioned by Cheryl Lee. But to be honest, these things were just so. The so-called South Gate was just a gate. What national treasure? There was really nothing to see. Gyeongbokgung was more or less a building complex. He could take a look at it. Cheongwadi wasn't allowed to enter, but it was the only place in Seoul where he could see the police. After looking around, Cheryl Lee took Jiang Hai and the others to eat a South Korean barbecue at noon. After eating the barbecue, they continued to stroll in the afternoon. But there weren't many places to visit. Chapter 829. Myeongdong was a landmark in South Korea in the eyes of many fans of Korean dramas. Because there were many Korean dramas that would be filmed here, the business street that was originally not very popular unknowingly became very popular. In Myeongdong, all the shops required waiters who could speak Chinese. These people were prepared for the Chinese tourists. It can be said that over the year, more than 80% of the transactions in Myeongdong were from Chinese tourists. There were very few Southern Caucasians who would come here to buy things. Compared to the South Gate and East Gate, the sales here were much higher. But there was an important problem. Other than some super department stores, the so-called luxury goods sold here were actually more of South Korea's local brands. The most famous foreign brand was Zara. Zara was a Spanish brand. To be honest, the Spanish people did not earn as much as Wuxia people. In Europe, it was rare to find someone who could earn more than Wuxia. Of course, this was referring to the purchasing rate. There were not many young people who could earn more than 2,000 euros a month overseas. Of course, this was after tax. In China, there were not many young people who could earn more than 2,000 euros a month. After all, the starting salary in China was about 3,000 euros. So, the big brands in Spain were just so. That was why not many South Koreans came to Myeongdong. Most of them were foreign tourists. Jiang Hai and the others strolled around the place and then left. Even if they were women, it was very difficult for them to have the impulse to buy things here. After all, Jiang Hai's family lived in the United States. What they bought there was cheaper than here, and the quality was better than here. What was there to buy there? After walking around Myeongdong, they went to Nanshan. Nanshan Park in South Korea was a landmark building. The most famous building was Nanshan Pagoda. This place was also popular because of Korean dramas and the like. But Jiang Hai came over to take a look. To be honest, there was nothing fun about this old park. The whole tower was only 200 meters high. Compared to the 500 or 600 meter towers in China, there was a big difference. And the whole Nanshan Hill, it was more accurate to say that it was a hill. Jiang Hai came from Ice City in the plains, but in his view, Nanshan Hill was a hill, not to mention his friends from the south. But there were some die-hard fans who liked this place very much. When Jiang Hai and the others went to play, there were people taking selfies everywhere. If you want to take a selfie, then take a good selfie. After all, this place was also a scenic spot. If you want to do something about it, then do something about it. Jiang Hai could only laugh at this. After walking around Nanshan Pagoda for a while, they went directly to the revolving Western restaurant on the 5th floor for dinner. Then, Jiang Hai and the rest drove directly to Bayou Ting. The so-called Bayou Ting did not refer to a hotel or a building. It referred to an area. The city of South Korea was divided into areas at the beginning. Below the area was a cave. They did not understand why it was divided into caves, but this was how it was divided. Bayou Ting Cave, compared to Myeongdong, was also a trendy distribution center. But compared to Myeongdong, which was mostly tourists, there were more local tourists in South Korea here. This was basically a place where the so-called elites and petty bourgeoisie gathered. In addition to the famous brands, there were many cafes, restaurants with specialties from different countries, beauty shops, and so on. At the same time, there were many South Korean companies here. It was normal to meet some celebrities here. But to be honest, it was not a big deal to meet a celebrity in South Korea because there were really too many celebrities in South Korea. They relied on this to push up their economy. In addition to these things, of course, there were also some high-end nightclubs and high-end bars. This was because during the day, the main customers here were fashionable women in their 20s. Where there were women, there would naturally be men. Where there were men, there would be demand. So when it was night time, the nightclubs here were also quite chaotic. Jiang Hai said that he did not like to go to nightclubs because he did not like to be too noisy, but he was still somewhat interested in the place arranged by Cheryl Lee. After the car was parked, Jiang Hai and the rest walked into the nightclub that Cheryl Lee had arranged in advance. As soon as they walked in, Jiang Hai was shocked by the lively atmosphere. He had to admit that the people of South Korea really liked to go to nightclubs. Many of the dance songs were from South Korea. The musicians here also particularly liked to play electronic music and dance music. When Jiang Hai came, it was almost 10 o'clock in the evening. It was the time when people were having the most fun. Countless strangely dressed young men and women were doing their best to dance on the dance floor. Regardless of whether it was plastic surgery or not, Jiang Hai glanced around. The quality of the girls here was quite good. They had the face and the figure. When they danced, they might have been influenced by some girl groups, so their dance steps were quite ***************. Forcibly withdrawing his gaze, Jiang Hai followed the waiter to the second floor. The private room booked by Cheryl was on the second floor. The private room on the second floor facing the stage was the one she booked. After they sat down, a waiter came over and asked them what they wanted. Although Jiang Hai did not like this kind of environment, he was still quite interested in drinking. So he ordered 2 bottles of wine, a lot of beer, a fruit plate, snacks, and so on. Not long after, those things were served. Cheryl had been texting ever since she sat in the private room. Jiang Hai stood in front of the window, looking at the dancing crowd below. Although he would not go over and dance with them, it did not prevent Jiang Hai from looking. Just as Jiang Hai was fascinated by the scene, 3 women came in from outside. As soon as they entered the private room, they happily greeted Cheryl Lee. At the same time, they looked at Jiang Hai and Azalina with some caution. They gently nodded, then looked at Cheryl Lee with some doubts. At this time, Jiang Hai was also looking at them. He had to admit that the 3 girls who came in were quite good-looking. 2 of them were nearly 1.7 meters tall, and one of them was about 1.6 meters tall. They were all wearing tight one-step dresses, outlining their perfect figures, especially the tallest girl. Her indescribable place and waist were completely disproportionate, giving Jiang Hai a sense of déjà vu of the South Korean version of Wallace. "Come and sit down first. Jiang Hai, come over too. Let me introduce you. This is Jiang Hai, a rich man from Wuxia in the United States. His wealth is far beyond your imagination. This is his bodyguard." Seeing that the 3 people seemed to be a little embarrassed, Cheryl Lee immediately pulled them over and introduced them with a smile. After hearing Cheryl Lee's words, the 3 people here were stunned for a moment. Because Jiang Hai doesn't seem to be a rich man. After introducing Jiang Hai, she directly introduced the 3 people here, which were her so-called bureau. This girl in a tight suit is called Li Xiaofan, an online streamer and a model. This is Sun Yunju, also a model. This is Yin Soan, an online streamer. I heard that she recently signed a contract with Wuxia's platform. Looking at Jiang Hai, Cheryl Lee also introduced the 3 people in front of her. "Annyeonghaseyo, hello." After hearing Cheryl's words, Yin Soan greeted Jiang Hai with her strange Mandarin. Jiang Hai also responded with a smile. "Annyeonghaseyo, I'm really sorry. I was streaming just now, so I came late." Hearing Jiang Hai also speak, Li Xiaofan also said with a smile, but she spoke in English. She can also communicate with Jiang Hai if she can speak English. "It doesn't matter, we just arrived. Do you want to drink anything? Wine or drinks?" Looking at the 3 people in front of him, Jiang Hai also smiled. The beauties apologized, and they didn't come too late. Jiang Hai didn't care, but asked them. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the 3 beauties looked at each other, then they couldn't help but laugh. "Mr. Jiang, you don't come to this kind of place often, right?" At this time, Sun Yunju, who was sitting in the middle, asked Jiang Hai. I don't come here often. I don't like noisy places." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai touched his nose a little awkwardly. He really didn't understand these things. Generally, boys don't ask girls if they want to drink when they come here. From this, it can be seen that Mr. Jiang is a good person. At this time, Yin Soan also said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was even more at a loss. "Am I labeled as a good person just like this? Let's drink beer. Come on, cheers." At this time, Cheryl also came over, opened a few bottles of beer and stuffed them into the hands of these girls, then said with a smile. Hearing Cheryl's words, the girls here also raised the beer bottles in their hands. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai also smiled softly. If they want to drink, then drink. Anyway, it's not like he can't afford it. After several bottles touched together, everyone also took a big sip. Jiang Hai also tasted South Korea's beer for the first time. How should he put it? The taste was not very good, but it was barely drinkable. The beer that Jiang Hai and the others drank was called Height Hit. It was not cheap, but the taste was really ordinary. The alcohol content was a little high, and it was not strong. The bitter taste was very strong. No wonder in South Korea, soju was much better than beer. Chapter 830. What kind of business does Mr. Jiang do? After drinking a few mouthfuls of beer, these girls were more relaxed and began to wander around the room. Cheryl Lee also took them to play. At this time, Li Xiaobin, who had been paying attention to Jiang Hai just now, came over and said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at this woman. Even if Jiang Hai had seen so many delicate flowers, this woman could be rated above 90 points in Jiang Hai's eyes. Whether it was because of makeup or plastic surgery, Jiang Hai didn't plan to spend a long time with her anyway, so objectively speaking, this woman was very good-looking. She had an oval face, slender and big eyes, 2 reclining silkworms, a tall nose, a small mouth, long hair dyed half blonde, coupled with a slender neck and beautiful collarbones, and of course, the most important, 2 brutal forces. She was indeed a weapon that could harvest otakus on the internet. Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at her. Oh, I raise cattle in the United States. Jiang Hai quietly picked up the beer and took a sip. He wasn't the kind of person who couldn't take his eyes off something. Before he went berserk, his self-control was still very strong. Raise cattle? Does this make money? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Li Xiaobin was stunned for a moment, then asked with some doubts. In fact, just like ordinary people, if ordinary people say that they raise cattle, people may not think that they have much money. This Li Xiaobin was the same. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, she couldn't help but have some doubts. Oh, it's okay. Touching his nose, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Although he wouldn't hide his wealth, he wouldn't show off for no reason. This was not in line with his character. Moreover, even if he said that he raised cattle and fish and made billions of dollars a year, these people would have to believe it. Oh, I see. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Li Xiaobin smiled awkwardly and unconsciously moved back. To be honest, for women at their level, money was not the most important thing. For example, Yin Sowen, who was next to him, had signed a contract with Wuxia's live streaming platform. It was said that just the signing fee alone was astronomical. In China, a first-class streamer could earn millions or even tens of millions of RMB a year. These people might not be the top streamers, but they definitely earned a lot. On average, each of the 3 people present had an annual income of nearly 10 million renminbi. According to the current exchange rate, 10 million renminbi was equivalent to 1.6 billion won. In South Korea, the top celebrities only earned this much in a year, and they still had to pay the management company. However, they only needed to pay some to their own team. Although this industry was purely based on youth, it could also be said that they were not short of money. The reason why they came here this time was mainly because of their relationship with Cheryl. Although they were not short of money, they lacked fame and connections. They knew a little about the relationship between Cheryl and Pra Walton. In their opinion, the friend she wanted to introduce should also be a celebrity in the United States. If they could make friends with such a celebrity and have some in-depth exchanges, they would have some feelings in the future. If something happened to them in South Korea, it was very important to have someone who could protect them abroad. But now that Jiang Hai said that he was just a cattle farmer and had no ability, they couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. I'm going to the bathroom. After thinking for a while, Li Xiaobin smiled and said to Jiang Hai. After putting down the beer bottle, she went to the side and pulled Cheryl Lee, who was still looking for something to play, into the bathroom of the private room. After seeing her movements, the other 2 people also subconsciously followed her. As soon as she walked in, she locked the door and looked at Cheryl with an unhappy face. "What's the matter?" Looking at her gaze, Sun Yunju first looked at her in confusion, then asked her. "The big boss outside is a cattle farmer?" Hearing Sun Yunju's words, Li Xiaobin ignored her and continued to ask Cheryl. As soon as she heard what she said, Cheryl understood what she wanted to say and couldn't help but smile disdainfully. "You're too anxious. And you guys, when you ask him later, don't leak anything. If you ask him, he will definitely say that he is a cattle farmer. But this is not wrong, he is indeed a cattle farmer." Hearing Li Xiaobin's question, Cheryl couldn't help but smile and said. Hearing that the person they were going to accompany today was a cattle farmer, Yin Suan and Sun Yunju frowned. They didn't come here to accompany a farmer. But this guy is a cattle farmer. However, although this guy is a farmer, he's actually very rich. The cows he raises can be sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars. He has tens of thousands of cows and can make several $billion a year just by selling cows. He also has a huge fishing farm. I've been to his seaside and heard that he can sell fish for several $billion a year. Recently, I've heard that he can also sell grass for several $billion. Seeing the three women frowning, Cheryl couldn't help but giggle and say. Hearing Cheryl's words, the three women looked at each other. They could clearly see a trace of distrust in each other's eyes. Since when could one earn so much from raising cows and fish? And it was calculated in hundreds of millions? Moreover, you should have heard about his relationship with the Walmart Group. He also has a close relationship with a prince of Dubai. At the same time, he also has some connections with several tycoons in the United States. I heard that he is also a shareholder of Google. Alas, originally, I wanted to find a way out for you since we have a good relationship. But I didn't expect you to doubt me. Looking at the three women in front of her, Cheryl Lee chuckled and proudly raised her head. Seeing Cheryl Lee's appearance, the three women couldn't help but laugh. They didn't care about losing face in front of Cheryl. As long as they could get what they wanted, everything else didn't matter. After discussing in the bathroom, the four women left together. After returning to the private room, the three women were clearly more interested in Jiang Hai. Even Cheryl Lee was pushed to the side. Looking at the scene in front of her, Cheryl Lee didn't care. She was the one who invited the three women to accompany Jiang Hai. The more they drank, the more they drank. It was said that it was easy to do that after getting drunk. When a man wanted to do something with a woman, he would force her to drink. When a woman wanted to do something with a man, she would force them to drink. When a woman wanted to do something with a man, she would also force them to drink. Obviously, these women wanted to force Jiang Hai to drink. But unfortunately, even if it was a test of alcohol, it was impossible for them to force Jiang Hai to drink. When the alcohol that Jiang Hai ordered was almost finished, Jiang Hai's consciousness was still very clear. However, the three women seemed to have drunk too much. Of course, whether they were really drunk or not, Jiang Hai didn't know. But at this time, they were making noise about how hot it was. From time to time, they tore their clothes, revealing some things that couldn't be described. They also took the initiative to entangle Jiang Hai and whisper to him. Although Jiang Hai couldn't understand 9 out of 10 sentences, it didn't prevent him from understanding what these women meant. After being teased for so long, Jiang Hai felt that he was gradually losing his senses. It seemed that he would have to sleep late tonight. At this time, in the hall on the first floor, the atmosphere had reached its peak. After the live DJ played a few fireworks, several women ran out from the backstage. As soon as they saw these women, the people below became even crazier. Wow, this bar is very awesome. Today, they invited Hello Venus. Looking at the stage below, Yin Suan said with a smile, but hearing her words, Jiang Hai had some doubts because he didn't know what this was. Hello Venus is the name of a group. They debuted in 2012 and have never been very popular. At first, they were suppressed by Xiaofan and TRR. Now, it is the era of AOA. They have never been popular, so they disbanded in 2014, but I heard that they are looking for opportunities to return to the stage recently. Looking at Jiang Hai's puzzled eyes, Sun Yunju also explained to Jiang Hai. "Oh, that's it." Although he said this, to be honest, Jiang Hai really didn't know what the hell it was. At this time, the girls on the dance floor below had finished their opening remarks. The music sounded, and they were ready to dance. "Wow, it's wiggle, I can dance this." Hearing the music, Li Xiaobin couldn't help but jump up with a smile. She said to Jiang Hai with a happy face, then came to the middle of the private room. "Tisk, as if no one can dance. Come, let's dance together." After hearing her words, Yin Soan and Sun Yunju also came over. After the three women looked at each other, they laughed. As the music sounded, the three of them bent down at the same time and delivered the indescribable thing that was perfectly wrapped in a one-step skirt to Jiang Hai. Ugh! Looking at the scene in front of him, Jiang Hai was a little confused. What's going on? Fortunately, he quickly understood that these were dance moves. However, he had to admit that the dance steps of the Southern Gaoli were indeed terrifying. Every step was like the claws and teeth of a devil. If young people were to see this, they would definitely suffer from malnutrition. It seems that the compulsory military service of South Korea should be related to these women's groups. When they can't stand it anymore, they have to go to the army to recuperate for 2 years. Otherwise, no matter how many eggs you have, you will not be able to stand it. Chapter 831. Hiss, I can't stand it anymore. Let's go back. Before the dance in front of him was finished, Jiang Hai already couldn't stand it anymore, so his eyes lit up and he said to Cheryl Li next to him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Li also rolled her eyes at Jiang Hai, then clapped her hands and gestured to the three girls. Then the three girls came over with a smile and began to pack their things. Jiang Hai naturally took advantage of them while they were packing their things. But instead of saying that Jiang Hai took advantage of them, it was better to say that they deliberately let Jiang Hai take advantage of them. After fooling around for about 10 minutes, they finished packing, but Jiang Hai's car certainly couldn't accommodate these 6 people. Although Jiang Hai didn't mind one of them sitting on him, the police would mind. So Jiang Hai thought for a while. He and Cheryl Li took a taxi back. After all, he needed someone who could speak Korean to follow him. Azalina took them back to Jiang Hai's room in the Shilla Hotel first. Because if they wanted to take a taxi, it would be troublesome to meet them on the street now. Therefore, Cheryl Li specially called for a taxi so that they could wait downstairs. As for Azalina and the others, they left first. After about 5 minutes, Cheryl's phone rang. The taxi had arrived. Then the two walked downstairs and prepared to go out and take a taxi back. But just when Jiang Hai was about to walk to the exit, he suddenly found a woman at a bar table in the distance. She seemed to have drunk too much and was lying on the table. Beside her, there were many men who always inadvertently walked past her table. This South Korea is really messy. Looking at the scene in front of him, Jiang Hai chuckled. He wasn't going to meddle in other people's business. At this moment, a person who looked like a gangster finally couldn't help it. He walked in front of the woman and prepared to take her away. This woman may still have some consciousness, so she resisted. This resistance caused the hair on her face to move to the side, revealing her face. When he saw her face, Jiang Hai froze for a moment, because he was very familiar with this face. To be exact, just 5 minutes ago, this face was still in front of his eyes. Sun Yunju? Looking at this woman, Jiang Hai couldn't help but gawk. Didn't she just leave with Azalina? Did Azalina suddenly throw a tantrum, so she left her here? And the clothes she is wearing are not the same. What the hell is this? Just as Jiang Hai was puzzled, Cheryl Li over there also saw this person. Ah, it's Sun Yunju. Jiang Hai, hurry up. You can't take her away. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was no longer puzzled. Cheryl Li and Sun Yunju were also friends. She shouldn't be mistaken. So Jiang Hai took 2 steps forward and went directly to the person who was about to take her away again. Boy, what are you doing? This sentence was in English. After Jiang Hai finished speaking, he took a step forward and said to this person with a fierce face. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, this person was stunned for a moment, and then a hint of fear flashed in his eyes. He didn't know if it was because he had a guilty conscience, or because he was afraid of Jiang Hai's height, or because Jiang Hai spoke in English, which shocked him. Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, this person said a string of Korean that Jiang Hai didn't understand, then slowly retreated. Let's go. After seeing Jiang Hai intimidating that person, Cheryl Li also came over, stroked the woman, and said in her ear. Perhaps hearing a woman's voice, this woman who was 80% drunk no longer struggled, but directly fell on Cheryl Li. Cheryl Li was Pra Walton's girlfriend. Jiang Hai's beef and fish were naturally enough to eat. Every time Pra Walton came to slaughter a cow, Jiang Hai would give her a free cow for them to eat. Although a cow was more than 100,000 yuan, Jiang Hai wouldn't be stingy with these things. Therefore, although Cheryl Li wasn't tall and had a slender figure, her strength wasn't small. Without Jiang Hai's help, she could carry the woman in front of her. Of course, Jiang Hai wouldn't let her carry her like this. So after Jiang Hai scared away that person, he took the initiative to take the woman and walked outside. Carrying her like a princess, Jiang Hai also looked at this woman carefully. The more he looked at Jiang Hai, the more he felt that something was wrong. Because although this woman looked very similar to Sun Yunju, she seemed to be a little older, and her figure wasn't so good. Most importantly, there was a mole on her nose. If it was normal, Jiang Hai might think about it. But now, before he could think about it, the taxi had already arrived. In order to avoid misunderstanding, Cheryl Li carried the woman and sat in the back seat of the car, while Jiang Hai, who paid the fare, sat in the front. After saying that it was the Shilla Hotel, Jiang Hai didn't think about it anymore. Instead, he focused on looking at the night view of Seoul. It was now around 11 o'clock in the evening. There weren't many cars in Seoul, so the car drove very fast. It didn't take long for them to arrive at the Shilla Hotel. After paying the fare, Jiang Hai carried the completely drunk Sun Yunju and Cheryl Li out of the car and walked into the hotel. After taking the elevator to his floor, Jiang Hai went straight into his room. Walking into the room, Jiang Hai found that Azalina was sitting in the living room watching TV at this time. Seeing Jiang Hai carrying a woman back, she was stunned for a moment. Then, she shook her head indifferently. She was just a little surprised. It didn't matter to her how many women Jiang Hai had. Where are they? Looking at Azalina's gaze, Jiang Hai, who originally had some doubts about whether this woman was Sun Yunju, was relieved because he misunderstood the meaning of Azalina's gaze. Azalina was just a little surprised, but he thought that Azalina's gaze was, "How can you still find her?" Now that she saw Jiang Hai carrying her back, she didn't care. God knows what this woman did to her just now. She's in the room. Be gentle. You still have work tomorrow. Looking at Jiang Hai, Azalina said to him. Work? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was a little confused. Work? Well, didn't you say that you wanted the team to contact the South Korea government today? We've already contacted them today. The beef will be flown to Wuxia tonight, and the compensation is only $10 million. The South Korea government agreed very quickly, but they have another request. They will tell you tomorrow. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai nodded a little woodenly. It seemed that he couldn't stay out too late today. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai and Cheryl Li walked into Jiang Hai's room together with Sun Yunju. Clang clang. However, just as they walked in, Jiang Hai saw three figures suddenly jump out from a distance. Of course, their jump did not scare Jiang Hai, and Jiang Hai was looking at the clothes of the three people in front of him unscrupulously. After the three of them came back, they deliberately took a shower first and then changed into very light pajamas. Rather than pajamas, it was more like a pair of, it was fine as long as everyone understood it. Their attire was visible at a glance, and there was a hint of sexiness to it. It made Jiang Hai's fingers itch instantly. Just as he was about to pounce on them, he realized that something was wrong. Sun Yunju, who he saw just now, was standing in front of him. If Sun Yunju was here, then what about the one in his arms? Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at the one in his arms, and the others also looked at this person. This is... They originally thought that with the three of them tonight, Jiang Hai was already a little too much, but they didn't expect Jiang Hai to bring another one back. What the hell is this? Just now, this sister drank too much in the bar and was about to be bullied by some hooligans. I thought it was Yunju. It seems that I misunderstood. Looking at Sun Yunju in front of her, Cheryl Li smiled a little awkwardly. What should we do now? Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai asked in a daze. This is awkward, call the police. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Yin Soen thought for a moment and said to Jiang Hai first. No, we didn't call the police just now. If we call the police now, we won't be able to explain it clearly. And if it is exposed. But as soon as she mentioned this matter, Li Xiaobin and Sun Yunju next to her immediately rejected it. They are also considered public figures with a reputation. If they call the police and the reporters came and found that the three of them were accompanying a rich businessman late at night, then their future will be ruined. And they don't have the confidence to catch Jiang Hai. As soon as this idea was mentioned, it was rejected. Then what should we do? Looking at the four people in front of him, Jiang Hai was also a little helpless. What is this? What's there to be conflicted about? It's the same as chasing a sheep. I know how powerful you are. Then let her join us. Hearing Jiang Hai say this, Cheryl Li also took the initiative to come over and said with a smile. Is this something I should take the initiative to do? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little dumbfounded. She must have mistaken the priority, she drank so much in the bar. She must be prepared to be picked up. Instead of letting those hooligans take advantage of her, it's better to let you take advantage of her. But we have to check first. I know you don't want to wear a raincoat. Don't get infected with any diseases. That will be troublesome. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl also said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was still somewhat hesitant. Looking at his appearance, Cheryl Li signaled to the others with her eyes. Then Yin Soen and the others swarmed over. It would be impossible for them to rest early tonight. Chapter 832. This body is so dirty. Back to the morning when Jiang Hai and the others went out to play. When Lin Yuner and Jean Taiyan, who had experienced something last night, went downstairs, they happened to meet Lin Yuner's boyfriend, Li Shengji. When he saw his girlfriend coming down from the elevator in the morning with her clothes in a mess and no makeup, he was stunned. When Lin Yuner saw him, she was even more stunned. The most embarrassing thing in the world might be something like this. It was too cruel, too NTR. But unfortunately, it was not Jiang Hai who was being tortured. Even if Jiang Hai knew, he would at most say that it was too embarrassing. He was originally a good person. Fortunately, Jean Taiyan reacted quickly. She immediately pulled Lin Yuner and got into the car they drove yesterday and quickly left. After Lin Yuner left, Li Shengji seemed to have gone crazy and kept calling her. He drove out to look for traces of them, but unfortunately, there was nothing. Lin Yuner could not face this man at this time. She also guessed that he might go to her home to look for her, so she did not go home. Instead, she went to Jin Taeyan's house. When she got home, the first thing she did was to take a shower. But after rubbing many times, she still felt very dirty. Not physically, but spiritually. She wiped the steamy mirror and looked at her body in the mirror that was already red from rubbing. Big drops of tears flowed down her red and swollen doe eyes. Probably because she heard the sound of the bathroom, Jin Taeyan also walked over and leaned against the door. She did not know what to do now. Last night, Yuner was not the only one who had a nightmare. She also had a nightmare. But now, she had to comfort this injured girl. But what should she say? What should she do? She also needed someone to comfort her. What should she do? Han Jiaran was born in Seoul, South Korea in 1982. She was considered a top student and graduated from Tsinghua University. In 2002, she entered the entertainment industry through a commercial. Then, she starred in Yellow Handkerchief. Once the TV series was broadcast, it could be said that she became popular. In the idol circle of South Korea, the most popular were not the more famous ones in Wuxia, such as Song Huiqiao and Kwon Ji-xian. The most popular was naturally the number one beauty of South Korea, Kim Tae-hee, while Han Jiaran and Sun Yijun coexisted behind her. It could be said that they were all part of the top group of female celebrities in South Korea. As for Han Jiaran, she could be said to be one of the representatives at the peak of her career. In 2005, she married another actor, Yen Jungshuan. He retired in 2007, probably due to financial reasons. He came back in 10 years, and after that, he became popular again. However, not long after she became popular, she retired again because of her pregnancy. It was the same this time. It had been a long time since she appeared in the public eye because she gave birth to her baby this year. Originally, this was a very enviable family in the entertainment industry, but things were never as perfect as outsiders imagined. The woman was pregnant for more than 9 months. When the man went out to work, he could always come into contact with those young and beautiful girls who wanted to climb up the social ladder. Naturally, her husband slowly went astray. She just found out about this today. After a big fight with her husband, who had just returned from a business meeting, she went to the bar to drink alone. However, she didn't expect that she would drink too much. She couldn't remember what happened next. She only vaguely remembered that she was taken away by a woman. Then, she vaguely remembered that she seemed to have entered a room where several women took off her clothes. Afterwards, she had a dream. It was a dream about something, a dream that couldn't be described. It wasn't until she woke up the next day and found herself lying naked in a room that she finally realized what had happened to her the night before. Ah! She held on to her hair and screamed loudly. She couldn't believe that she had spent the night outside like this. And, a few hours ago, she was still yelling at her husband for being unfaithful. But now, what right did she have to scold him? The relationship between men and women was unequal to begin with. This was even more so in South Korea. If a man got into an accident, a woman was likely to forgive him. But if a woman got into an accident, not only would the man not forgive her, but the whole world would criticize her. Thinking of this, Coriana couldn't help but feel a lump in her throat. Tears began to fall from her eyes. What happened? At this time, the door of the room opened, and Jiang Hai walked in with a puzzled look on his face. But when he saw Han Jiaran sitting there crying, he couldn't help but be stunned for a moment, then he smiled a little awkwardly. "Oh, you're awake." Looking at this woman, Jiang Hai didn't know what to say. He could only respond with a smile. You beast, you're worse than a pig or a dog." Looking at Jiang Hai, Coriana seemed to have found a breakthrough. She began to yell at him loudly. But unfortunately, it was like casting pearls before swine. Jiang Hai didn't understand at all. "I'm sorry, I don't speak Korean, so I don't understand what you're saying. I still have things to do now. If you think of a solution, you can wait for me. You can use this room as you wish." Until she was tired of scolding, Jiang Hai scratched his head and said something that almost made her faint. Then he smiled apologetically and left. Looking at Jiang Hai's back as he left, Coriana threw the pillow next to her with all her strength. It hit the door heavily, and then she began to scream. But after screaming for a long time, she gradually calmed down. Since things had already happened, it was meaningless to think about it now. Now, she had to think about how to solve this matter. From this, it can be seen that Han Jia's ability to take a blow was much stronger than Lin Yun. Lin Yun was trying to save her career and her family. In the end, she ended up having sex with Jiang Hai. It could be said that one was willing to fight while the other was willing to obstruct. In the end, they both collapsed. But this woman quickly calmed down and began to think of a way. Her mind turned. The first thing she thought of was that this matter couldn't be publicized. She couldn't let others know. She couldn't call the police. Judging from what Jiang Hai said just now, although he had an Asian face, he should be a foreigner. If this matter was exposed, then she would be ruined. And this guy just patted his butt and went abroad. She still couldn't do anything. Secondly, she had to hide this matter from her husband. She was now in no mood to pursue her husband's affairs outside. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but feel sad. She was really a coward. She was raped, but the result was that she couldn't publicize it. She even had to reconcile with the person who raped her and ask him to help her hide this matter. Shame, although she felt humiliated from the inside out, she still stood up and put on her clothes. She wanted to find the man just now and explain things to him. However, when she opened the door, she only found two women in the living room. These two women, one a foreigner and one an Asian, were sitting there watching TV. When they heard the door open, the two of them also looked over. After seeing that it was Coriana, they smiled kindly. This. Looking at the situation outside, Coriana couldn't help but feel a little confused. She didn't know what to say. "Hello, what's the matter? Are you not feeling well?" Looking at her, Cheryl Lee stood up and asked with some doubts. The police station was open until very late last night, but early this morning, Yin Sowen, Li Xiaobin, and Sun Yunju all left. After she got up, she also watched TV here. Last night, it was said that Jiang Hai would have a meeting with the senior management of South Korea today. So just now, Azalina and Galina left with Jiang Hai, leaving only Wallace Shelley here. The two of them were watching TV together. At this time, Coriana appeared, which also startled them. "No, nothing, cough, there's something, where is that man?" Although it was a bit difficult to say this, Coriana gritted her teeth. For her family, for her career, for her everything, she must reach an agreement with that man. Man? Oh, Jiang Hai. He went to a meeting. Are you looking for him for something? Looking at Coriana in front of her, Cheryl Lee asked with some doubts. Looking at her gnashing her teeth, it was better to pretend that she didn't know anything now. If this woman knew that he was the one who asked Jiang Hai to bring her back yesterday, she would probably find trouble with him. Yes, if it's convenient, can you give me his phone number? Taking a deep breath, Coriana forcibly suppressed the anger in her heart and asked Cheryl Lee in front of her. Hearing her words, Cheryl Lee shrugged and gave her Jiang Hai's phone number. After getting Jiang Hai's phone number, she nodded gently. After thinking for a while, she went into the bathroom first. After tidying up and making sure that there was no problem, she went downstairs. Of course, she still had to be careful when going downstairs. After all, there were a lot of paparazzi here. She quietly went downstairs and got into a taxi. Then, she called the number that Cheryl Lee had given her. Chapter 833. Sitting in an extended Rolls-Royce, a person sent by Zheng Jin sat in front of Jiang Hai and said with a serious face, "Boss, this time, the South Korea side wants to see you. Their intention is very clear. They want to get the formula for the mutation of the forage from your hands, or they want to cooperate with you." This person was the person in charge of the negotiation team. Gao Peng had to admit that Zheng Jin was a talent. She had a good eye for people. The person in charge of the negotiation team in front of him was called Toulouse Parkville. He was a European of Greek descent. However, he had lived in the United States since he was young. He was already 35 years old this year. 10 years ago, he graduated from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. In the beginning, he was high-spirited. He went to New York to make a living as a trader, a salesman, and a worker. He had his glory and his downfall. After Jiang Hai established the Tinglong Company last year, Zheng Jin felt that he was a good person after some introductions. Thus, she accepted him into the company. It turned out that Toulouse Parkville was not suitable for starting his own business. However, it was not bad for him to work for someone else. He started as a salesman and became a sales supervisor within 3 months. Half a year later, he was promoted to the position of deputy manager of the sales department. Moreover, his ability had already surpassed that of a manager. His negotiation skills and ability to read people's minds were quite good. Most importantly, his 10 years of experience in society had smoothed out his edges and corners. He was now very willing to stay in the Tinglong Company. Of course, the salary that Jiang Hai gave him was also the basis for his agreement. Jiang Hai's company was not listed, so his shares were 100%. However, he gave out a 10% dividend to those who performed well. In addition to her annual salary of $1 million, Zheng Jin also received a 5% dividend. Although this was the first year, there was not much profit. After all, the Tinglong Company transported most of Jiang Hai's beef. However, the annual net profit was more than $50 million. She received a 5% dividend, which was $2.5 million. Together with her salary, it was $3.5 million. Such an annual salary was very scary for a new company. After all, the annual salary that the Walmart Group gave Prawalton was only $3 million. Of course, this was also because she was only in charge of one department. Toulouse Parkville's annual salary was $300,000. However, Zheng Jin gave him a 1% dividend, which meant that he could earn $800,000 this year. This was for a person who was unemployed a year ago. This was an astronomical figure. He knew very well that he was now tied to Jiang Hai's chariot. As long as he does his job well, his income will increase in the future. Otherwise, Zheng Jin wouldn't have sent him as the head of the negotiation team. And this time, he didn't come here in vain. Jiang Hai had already made an agreement with him before he came. They could get 10% of the negotiated amount, which was the compensation amount. Therefore, they were all holding back at the beginning. They wanted the $100 million compensation. That 10% was $10 million. Divided among the 6 of them, and even if Moses Adams' share was included, each of them would get more than $1 million. However, Jiang Hai was in the lead and fell in love with his woman. Therefore, the $100 million became $10 million. However, $10 million was not bad. Each of them would get more than $1 million. As for why the South Koreans invited Jiang Hai to Kingwadi, he could more or less guess it. I feel the same way. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai chuckled. As soon as the South Koreans raised their butts, Jiang Hai knew that they were going to shit a few sheep dung eggs. These people were famous for their shamelessness. Boss, these are the plans we made for you. You can take a look. Hearing that Jiang Hai was mentally prepared, Tuluman smiled and took out a stack of papers from his briefcase. He handed it to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai took it and looked at it briefly. To be honest, Jiang Hai hated looking at things. However, now that it was related to business, he had to look at it even if he did not want to. After glancing at the things on the paper, Jiang Hai really thought highly of Tuluman. On this stack of papers, almost all the things that the South Koreans might ask Jiang Hai about were listed. If Jiang Hai was interested, he could take note of it. According to the things written on it, it was enough to deal with the South Koreans without leaving any loopholes. However, Jiang Hai smiled and returned the stack of papers to Tuluman in front of him. Boss? Seeing Jiang Hai's action, Tuluman was a little confused. Was Jiang Hai not satisfied with these things? No, I'm quite satisfied with these things, but you've got one thing wrong. That's the problem between me and the South Koreans. Our pasture is unique in the world, and it's absolutely impossible for others to copy it. Therefore, the things you wrote about dealing with a country are more about me at the bottom, while the South Koreans are at the top. Looking at Tuluman in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled. To be honest, if he was just an ordinary person, then this document would be excellent. If his pasture could be deciphered, then this document would also be good. Because this document perfectly demonstrated the word subterfuge. It's not that I don't want to give it to you, it's not that I don't want to announce it, but it's not the time yet. This word subterfuge is a very correct approach for other people. After all, Jiang Hai is a person, and the South Koreans are a country. But it doesn't exist for Jiang Hai because his main business projects are in the United States. Wuxia is also connected. The South Koreans can't threaten him at all. He's probably going to leave this time, and it's unlikely that he'll come back in the future. The secret of the pasture will never be deciphered by anyone. He's more confident about this than anyone else. After all, there's only one Dragon Ball in the world, and it's now in his body. What's there to study? Therefore, the person who led this conversation between him and the South Koreans was Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai is standing in a high position, and he's looking at a country with a gaze of charity. Yes, the current Jiang Hai has such strength and ability. According to the Prawalton calculation, if Jiang Hai's manor were to be listed now, the cattle, the fishery, and the pasture, Jiang Hai's current wealth would be worth at least tens of billions. It wouldn't be a problem for him to become the richest man in the world. Of course, Jiang Hai is only rich. When it comes to influence, he's far behind. Yes, I understand. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Tuluman also nodded. Although he doesn't know where Jiang Hai's confidence comes from, believing that his pasture is absolutely impossible to decipher, Jiang Hai's confidence can save him a lot of trouble. Of course, he will still do what needs to be done. 10 years of working life made him understand. Sometimes, for some work, it's not a matter of whether you do it or not, but whether you do it or not. For example, this stack of reports. Even if he knew Jiang Hai's confidence, he would still do it. This is some of the rules of the workplace. Just like now, although Jiang Hai didn't use his report, he still praised him, didn't he? We've arrived at the Blue House. At this moment, Galina, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, suddenly said to the back of the car. After hearing her words, Jiang Hai also looked at the existence of the highest honor in South Korea. Let's go. Under the bright sun, Jiang Hai narrowed his eyes and said softly. Tuluman, who was sitting opposite him, got out of the car first and opened the door for Jiang Hai. Then, Azalina and Galina rushed over and stood next to Jiang Hai. At this time, the two had changed into casual women's suits. Their hair was tied up and they wore sunglasses. They really looked stern. In addition to the two of them, one of the two male bodyguards also came to act as a driver. After standing in place, Jiang Hai's group of 5 also walked into the Blue House. The guard had already reported the news of Jiang Hai's arrival, so when Jiang Hai walked to the door, there were already people there to greet him. Of course, with Jiang Hai's current status, the president of South Korea would not come to greet him. The people who came to greet him were the people in charge of this matter. Jiang Hai also knew 2 of them. One was the arrogant South Korean woman that Jiang Hai saw when he was selling grass. The other was the man called Li Shihui. When he saw Jiang Hai again after Jiang Hai came here, he was filled with emotions. If he had not been shameless enough to let the 2 women curry favor with Jiang Hai, he might have been a fool now. How could he be like this now? This time, he also received a mission. Because he confiscated Jiang Hai's plane, the sales time was shortened and the quality of the meat was slightly damaged. Therefore, Jiang Hai's legal team asked the South Korean government to compensate them with $10 million, but they could choose not to apologize. For a country, between $10 million and an apology, they naturally chose the former. How important was a country's face? As long as it could be settled with money, it was not a problem. However, the higher-ups also gave them some pressure. If the negotiations with Jiang Hai today achieved the expected result, then the $10 million would be taken by the South Korean government. If not, then Li Shihui would take it himself. Although Li Shihui also felt a little reluctant to take out 12 billion won, it was still within his acceptable range. However, if he could save it, it was naturally better to save it. Moreover, he thought that he had grasped Jiang Hai's weakness, which was why he was so happy today. However, if he thought that Jiang Hai was a person who was so easy to deal with, then he was wrong. Although Jiang Hai could not control his strength sometimes, if he knew that this was a trap, he would not jump into it. Chapter 834. Mr. Jiang Hai, I have been waiting for you for a long time. As soon as he saw Jiang Hai, Li Shihui greeted him with a smile on his face. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled, stepped forward and shook hands with him, then looked at the representative over there. I didn't expect that we would meet again so soon. Looking at Jiang Hai, the arrogant representative also said softly. Yeah, but didn't you say that you have nothing to do with this matter? Now it doesn't look like you have nothing to do with it. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the person here couldn't help but chuckle. Those people seem to think that this technology of yours is extremely important, and you are very hostile, so they sent me, someone who has been in contact with you, to explore your background. Looking at Jiang Hai, this person didn't care what Jiang Hai thought and said directly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled, and he couldn't deny such an attitude. Please. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't care about what he said, the person also nodded with a smile, then made a gesture of invitation. He motioned to Jiang Hai to go in, but just as Jiang Hai was about to walk in, his personal phone rang. Picking it up and looking at it, he found that it was an unfamiliar phone. Jiang Hai thought for a moment, then gestured to everyone, asking them to wait a moment, and then went to the side to pick it up. Hello? Hello, who is this? After connecting the phone, Jiang Hai asked the person on the other side. Hello, my name is. Cough, I don't know if you still remember what happened last night, I am the woman this morning. After hearing Jiang Hai's voice, the woman on the other side subconsciously wanted to say her name, but she quickly covered it up, and then said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also remembered the scene this morning. Oh, of course I remember. What's the matter? Looking at this woman, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. I think we should meet. I have something to say to you. After thinking for a while, the woman said to Jiang Hai over the phone. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai touched his nose. All right. I'm at the Blue House now. If you need me, you can come over first. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai decided to tell her his location. After all, something happened last night. Jiang Hai also wanted to know why she was looking for him. I want to talk to you in private. I won't take up too much of your time. As soon as she heard the 3 words Blue House, the woman on the other side was obviously stunned for a moment. Then she gently bit her lips and said to Jiang Hai. Oh, I don't know about this. Let's wait until you come over. I don't know when it will end here. Glancing at Li Shihuai and the man beside him, Jiang Hai thought for a while and said to her. Then, okay, when I arrive, I will call you. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the woman also said a sentence and then hung up the phone. In fact, when she heard that Jiang Hai was at the Blue House, to be honest, she was a little panicked. Blue House, the highest place in South Korea. For the people of South Korea, Blue House was the same as a certain sea in Wuxia. The people who could go there were undoubtedly people that she, as a star, couldn't afford to provoke. But for her career and her family, she must go and explain it to Jiang Hai. She took a deep breath, gave herself a pep talk, and directly called the taxi driver to drive to Blue House. At this time, after Jiang Hai saw her hang up the phone, he shrugged and followed the person who greeted him into the Blue House. Of course, after they entered, they couldn't walk around casually. After all, the president and the others were still working here. So they just entered a small conference room and sat down. The people here also exchanged a few pleasantries before getting to the main topic. After Li Shihuai spoke, Jiang Hai and Tuluman couldn't help but look at each other with a trace of disdain on their lips. Sure enough, the first thing South Korea wanted to do when they called Jiang Hai over was to buy out Jiang Hai's secret recipe for the growth of forage grass. For this, they were willing to pay $50 billion, which was 60 trillion won. South Korea's national GDP was $1,378 billion a year. They could give half of the country's total monthly income to Jiang Hai, which was already a large sum of money. But to be honest, 50 billion was not enough for Jiang Hai. You don't have to say that. I don't know why my forage grass is so good, let alone buying it out. If you mention this again, then I think our cooperation will end. Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai gently threw the pen in his hand on the table, then leaned back in his chair and spoke with a trace of disdain on his face. If Mr. Jiang doesn't want to share the secret of forage grass, then can you transfer your manor in Winthrop? We are also very interested in it. For this, we are willing to pay $20 billion. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Li Shihuai hesitated for a moment before speaking to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai looked at him like he was an idiot. Indeed, his manor itself was not very valuable, but the grass in the manor was very valuable. Moreover, the most important thing was that no one dared to touch him now because he could still create benefits for several parties. If his manor was gone, although he could build another one, Jiang Hai estimated that no one would give him a few more years to grow. Although $20 billion was good, if Jiang Hai wanted it, he would be like a child walking on the road with gold bricks in his arms. He had to have the ability to protect this sum of money, but now it seemed that he obviously did not have such ability. Let's go. It seems that the sincerity of the South Korea side is really not that good. I really regret letting you come into contact with them. After saying that, Jiang Hai directly stood up and prepared to leave. Seeing that Jiang Hai was about to leave, the South Korea people also stood up, but their expressions were a little contradictory. Some of them had a flattering smile on their faces, while others had a touch of coldness. Seeing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile in disdain. Would these guys dare to make a move on him in the Blue House? He just laughed it off. Mr. Jiang, don't we have to talk about everything? Don't you think so? Li Shihuai also walked out at this time and stopped Jiang Hai with a smile on his face. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai looked around and then slowly walked back. However, he did not take his bag and sit down. Instead, he stood there and touched the seat with his hand, slowly tapping it. If I hear one more time that you want me to sell secrets or manners, then I'll leave. From now on, the supply of pasture to the South Korea will also be suspended. You guys should be careful. Only Jiang Hai dared to speak so arrogantly to a country. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the South Korea people felt a little uncomfortable in their hearts. It was understandable. The people of South Korea were known for their strong self-esteem. In their eyes, the whole world had to acknowledge them. What they said was right. However, now that Jiang Hai actually slapped them in the face in front of them, they could not take it anymore. But fortunately, they knew that Jiang Hai was not a person to be trifled with, so they forcibly suppressed the anger in their hearts and returned to the table with a smile. Since the secret and the manor were not for sale, then it seemed that the only thing they could buy was the pasture and cooperation. According to them, they were going to raise a batch of their so-called national treasures after Jiang Hai provided them with pasture. Listening to them bragging about how awesome their Korean cows were, Jiang Hai could not help but chuckle, but he did not say anything. He just quietly watched these people bragging. Did they really think that he was Xiao Bai, who had never raised cows before? What a joke. Jiang Hai had been raising cows for 3 years. Not to mention other more detailed work, at least he could tell the quality of the cattle. At present, the best cattle in the world was naturally the Japanese cattle. Although he hated Japan, he had to admit this. Next would be the Charolais cattle, followed by the Limousin cattle. If the milk production was taken into account, then it would be the Simmental cattle. After that, it would be the German cattle, followed by the Angus cattle, and then the Mola buffalo. Purely based on the breed of cattle, the domestic Lucy yellow cattle were ranked higher than the South Korean cattle. However, the South Korea people were infatuated with their Han cattle. They boasted every day that Han cattle was a breed that could compete with Chinese cattle. In South Korea's Gangwon province, there was also a breeding ground for Han cattle. Jiang Hai did not like this kind of cattle. After all, it was just a cross between an ordinary European cattle and a South Korean cattle. However, since these people were willing to worship it, Jiang Hai could not say anything. After all, there were people in China who worshipped dogs. In this regard, Jiang Hai could only chuckle. After listening to them brag about 13 moves, they also explained their own intentions. They were going to build a new Han cattle breeding base in Jizhou Island. They were going to raise 1 million cows. Naturally, Jiang Hai was going to provide the feed for them. Unfortunately, Jiang Hai directly rejected them with a single sentence, so there was no more. My manor is only so big, and the amount of grass produced is only so much. If you can get the grass from Dauphin, Luke Shawn, or John Malone, then I will sell it to you. After listening to them talk for a long time, Jiang Hai did not talk nonsense and directly refuted them. When they heard what Jiang Hai said, the South Korea people were a little confused. Li Shihuai and the others looked at Jiang Hai. They couldn't figure out what was going on. This was because this guy didn't play according to the rules. Chapter 835. Do you have something important to tell Jiang Hai? Sitting in the cafe, Azalina watched this woman in front of her with a dubious look. After hearing Azalina's words, this woman stirred the coffee in front of her as she became hesitant. Because it was really a bit embarrassing for her to talk about it, Azalina also knew the woman opposite her. After all, Jiang Hai just took her back last night. At first, she thought she was Sun Yunju's sister or something, but now it seemed that she didn't know her. To be honest, Azalina didn't quite understand why she was looking for Jiang Hai. At first, she thought that she might be looking for Jiang Hai for some money, or to threaten Jiang Hai, but the current situation didn't seem to be the case. The things that this woman was wearing should be of great value. Although she should be in her 30s, she had maintained herself very well and was still very beautiful. She had the aura of a rich lady. This kind of woman should not have too many problems in terms of finances. Therefore, if Jiang Hai wasn't here for money, then what was it for? She wasn't too sure in her heart. Sigh, let's wait until he comes. After hesitating for a while, the woman opposite her thought about it and said to Azalina. The woman opposite her was naturally none other than Han Jia. After she took a taxi to the vicinity of Chongwadi, she got out of the car and walked over after disguising herself. Although she wasn't very famous in Wuxia and other places, she had always been a goddess in Wuxia. But in South Korea, she has always been a top goddess, so even if she has been out of the movie for a while, she still has to be careful. After arriving here, she called Jiang Hai. Not long after the call was connected, this woman named Azalina appeared in front of her, then took her to this coffee shop and told her that Jiang Hai was still in a meeting with the South Korean government, so he didn't have time to talk to her for the time being. He would come over after a while. Hearing Azalina's words, Han Jia also nodded. When she came, she knew that Jiang Hai was a guest of honor at Chongwadi. It seemed that she would definitely be at a disadvantage. Now her only thought was to reach an agreement with Jiang Hai. As long as Jiang Hai helped her keep last night's matter a secret, everything would be easy. Thinking of this, her hand holding the coffee cup unconsciously tightened. Sorry, those guys are really annoying, I'm late. Just as she was struggling here, Jiang Hai also walked in from outside the coffee shop. After walking in front of Han Jia, he smiled and said something in English. Oh. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Han Jia's reaction was not very enthusiastic. It was understandable. She and Jiang Hai actually had a grudge against each other, but this kind of grudge had to be temporarily suppressed. There was no such thing as enthusiasm. I heard that you were looking for me. Sitting next to Azalina, Jiang Hai looked at Han Jia in front of him and said. Are you done with your business? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Han Jia's words were a little difficult for a while, so she could only exchange a few words. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai sighed, then shook his head. Although you're from southern Gaoli, I still have to say that your government is really a bunch of bastards. You don't know what kind of conditions they gave me in order to get me to help you build a cattle farm. With a chuckle, Jiang Hai looked at Han Jia's in front of him and said somewhat speechlessly. Back to 10 minutes ago, in the conference room of Chongwadi where Jiang Hai was, those senior officials of South Korea first asked to buy out Jiang Hai's pasture. After that failed, they wanted to buy a manor. Naturally, this also didn't work. In the case that the first two conditions didn't work, they wanted to buy more pasture. The original 900,000 tons was naturally not enough. Therefore, when they asked to increase it to 3 million tons, Jiang Hai naturally refused. Although it was 3 million or 1 million, Jiang Hai had to consider where he would get the 100,000 tons from. Although he still had some in stock, why would he sell it to South Korea? The people of South Korea mainly had these three thoughts. If the first one didn't work, the second one didn't work, and the third one didn't work, then this meeting with Jiang Hai would be meaningless, especially since Li Shihuai had been discussing with Jiang Hai how much they could increase it. But Jiang Hai was adamant that they couldn't increase it at all, unless they could take it from him. But they weren't stupid. They knew that this was simply impossible. They couldn't afford to provoke Du Feynman. He was the royal family of Dubai. The Arabs in the Middle East all wore the same pants. If they dared to go against those people, these people could join forces to mess with the United States. If the United States was messed with, they would definitely vent their anger on South Korea. After all, South Korea didn't produce oil. Xiaofan was an international tycoon and one of the largest ranchers in the central part of the United States. They didn't dare to be arrogant. John Malone was even more so. These few big heads couldn't move, and the same was true for those small heads. That was why they were a little conflicted. Seeing that Jiang Hai was still unmoved, Li Shihui also knew that there wouldn't be any effect if he continued to talk like this. So, he thought of Jiang Hai's weakness and the habits of Wuxia people. Wuxia people were used to talking about business at the table, so he smiled and temporarily gave up on asking Jiang Hai to make a statement this morning. Instead, he made a dinner appointment in the evening to talk about it then. At this time, Jiang Hai was also a little interested in them. He wanted to see what these guys wanted to do. After making an appointment, Jiang Hai came to the coffee shop as Azalina said. "Oh, since you are so busy, then I will make a long story short. I hope that no one else will know about what happened last night." Looking at Jiang Hai, Han Jiaran hesitated for a moment and said to Jiang Hai in a tough tone. "Oh? Why do you say that?" Hearing her words, Jiang Hai leaned back and looked at her with some doubts. I have my own career, my own family, and I have a lovely daughter, so I don't want these to be destroyed. What happened last night was a heavy blow to my family, so I hope we can skip this part." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Han Jiaran bit her lip and said to Jiang Hai. "Oh." Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai shook his head. In fact, in essence, Jiang Hai is not a bad person. Of course, he is definitely not a good person. He is just an ordinary person. If Han Jiaran didn't come to him today and just left, maybe Jiang Hai would have forgotten about it, but this woman came to him specifically, which made Jiang Hai's soul of seeking death begin to stir. Touching his chin, he didn't agree as Han Jiaran imagined. I can give you money, please forget what happened last night." Looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, Han Jiaran hesitated for a moment, bit her lip, and said with a serious face. To be honest, although her family's finances are good, they are not particularly rich. They don't have to worry about food and clothing, but it is not to the point where they can squander money at will. "Money, I don't need it. If you need it, I can give you some. I don't exaggerate, my annual income is billions of dollars. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a guest of honor at the Blue House, right?" Hearing her words, Jiang Hai shook his head. It is not his style to ask a woman for money, so he directly said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Han Jiaran couldn't help but sigh. She knew that foreigners who can come here are definitely not people that can be bought with money, but besides money, she really didn't know what else she could give him. "Then, what exactly do you want?" Looking at Jiang Hai, Han Jiaran was a little discouraged because she really didn't know what to do. Looking at Jiang Hai pitifully, she was really a little confused now. "Let me think about it. If I think about it, I will call you." "Is the number you are calling your number?" Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai also wanted to tease her, so he shook his phone at her and said to her. "Well, this is my number. If you have any requests, you can call me at any time, please." Hearing Jiang Hai say this, Han Jiaran also stood up and bowed respectfully. Jiang Hai looked at her appearance and chuckled. He has to admit that sometimes teasing these women is quite interesting, just as Jiang Hai was teasing Han Jiaran here. On the other side of Kim Taeyan's house, Kim Taeyan and Lin Yuner were at home. Because of what happened the night before, they put off their work for the next 2 days and wanted to have a good rest at home. After a day of rest yesterday, although they were still in a bad mood today, they were much calmer. At this time, the two were watching TV at home. Although Li Shihui is a despicable person, he is a man of his words. Jiang Hai's team contacted the South Korea side. He then sent a text message to the company that he couldn't identify. Then the company's representative personally sent a message to the two, telling them that they could rest, but they could resume work whenever they wanted, and all the company's resources were at their disposal. This was Li Shihuai's ability in South Korea, but this kind of compensation didn't make the two girls feel warm in their hearts. After seeing the text message, they didn't even reply. They continued to stay in their small space, there in a daze. But some things couldn't be solved by running away. For example, now, their phones rang again. Chapter 836. What's the matter? Lin Yun, who was watching TV and eating, asked Jean Taiyan next to her. Lin Yun, was a girl who liked to eat very much, and she had a good appetite. She liked to eat, especially when she was sad these 2 days. She had to eat a lot every day. She didn't know if she would get fat. Maybe it was to avoid Li Shengji, but she really didn't have the face to see him now. So when Lin Yun, arrived at Jean Taiyan's house, she had already turned off her phone. Now only Jean Taiyan's phone was ringing. In order not to let Li Shengji find her, Jean Taiyan had also muted her phone these days. If it wasn't someone close to them, they really couldn't find them. But now, she had to look at this text message. Hearing Lin Yun's words, Jean Taiyan also hesitated, and then threw the phone aside. Nothing, just a text message from the company. Hearing what Jean Taiyan said, Lin Yun was stunned for a moment. Then, she glanced at Jean Taiyan, and then instantly snatched the phone. She opened the phone and found that it was indeed a text message from the company. It was just that what was said in the text message was not as simple as Jean Taiyan thought. Because it was an invitation to a cocktail party. Compared to the order a few days ago, today's words were much softer. But when she saw the words above, Lin Yun's body still trembled unconsciously. Because it was written very clearly that the guest she was accompanying was Jiang Hai. They had already experienced what it meant to accompany Jiang Hai, hadn't they? We can ignore them. After all, we have sacrificed the day before yesterday. Don't be afraid. Everything will pass. Looking at Lin Yun's appearance, Jean Taiyan also sighed, then hugged Lin Yun next to her and said anxiously. She was really afraid that something would happen to her sister. At the same time, she hated her company and that Li Shihuai. Were these guys going to continue to humiliate her like this? After the first time, they still wanted the second time? Would there be a third time, a fourth time, and a fifth time in the future? Thinking of this, she couldn't help but grit her teeth. She wouldn't do this. Even if she had to fight to the death, she wouldn't let these people have it easy. No, I want to go. However, at this moment, Lin Yun suddenly raised her head. Tears had already covered her face, but her voice was still very firm. She looked at Jean Taiyan and said with a serious face. But. Hearing that she was going, Jean Taiyan was at a loss. What was she going to do in such a situation? I want to see what these guys can do. Hearing what Jean Taiyan wanted to say, Lin Yun interrupted her and then said with a serious face. Seeing the anger in her eyes and the feeling of anger, Jean Taiyan sighed helplessly. Indeed, she didn't know what to do now. If Lin Yun wanted to go, then she had to accompany her. She also wanted to see what Jiang Hai and the others were going to do. He didn't take a shower or take off his clothes. He just lay down on the bed and fell asleep. Han Jia looked at her husband and smelled the smell of alcohol and perfume on his body. Needless to say, his drinking just now was obviously not that clean. Normally, Han Jia's wife would inevitably argue with him, but now she felt that she wasn't clean. What was there to argue about? After a self-deprecating smile, Han Jia's wife sat in the kitchen on the first floor. Her eyes began to wander. At this time, in a living room of the Shilla Hotel, Li Shihuai and the others were eating with Jiang Hai. Because Li Shihuai knew that Jiang Hai didn't like to eat Korean food, he decided to eat Western food this time. As for the Chinese food that was very famous in South Korea, Li Shihui didn't choose it. It was because the Chinese food in South Korea had changed beyond recognition. When it came to food, as a Wuxia person, Chinese food was naturally the first choice. It could be said that as long as there were people in the world, there would be Chinese restaurants. This sentence wasn't groundless. Chinese food had many characteristics. It was simple, easy, tasted good, made a lot of money, and was very inclusive, but it was also because of this that the Chinese food they ate abroad didn't feel like Chinese food at all. Jiang Hai lived in the United States. There were many Chinese restaurants in the United States, but in order to cater to the tastes of Americans, these Chinese food had been changed. Basically, they were all sour and sweet, but they weren't the sour and sweet taste of Chinese food. Jiang Hai liked to eat double-fried pork. Double-fried pork was sour and sweet. In the province, double-fried pork was made with ketchup. But the real double-fried pork was made with sugar and vinegar. Jiang Hai wasn't used to it. In the United States, almost all Chinese food was made with ketchup because Americans liked it. In South Korea, although it was quite close to Wuxia, the Chinese food here was also modified. Almost all the Chinese food here was too sweet. To be honest, Jiang Hai didn't like to eat it. For example, the famous zhejiang noodles, seafood noodles, and so on. Jiang Hai didn't like those taste very much. In Jiang Hai's view, this is also the difference between Chinese food and French food. French food and Chinese food are known all over the world. But no matter which French restaurant it was, it represented high-end. Wuxia's restaurant was very popular. Of course, it wasn't to say that Chinese food wasn't as high-end as French food. Jiang Hai was a Wuxia person. He naturally knew how terrifying Wuxia's dishes were. But the problem was that those high-end dishes couldn't be spread outside. Firstly, it was because foreigners might not like the taste of those dishes. Secondly, it was because some dishes were secret and wouldn't be spread outside. Because of this, Jiang Hai would rather eat Western food than Chinese food when he was overseas. It was because the Chinese food here couldn't be considered Chinese food to cater to the local customers. What appetizers, what soup, and so on, Jiang Hai had eaten them before. Naturally, he also introduced them in detail, so he didn't say much here. The food was also served separately, but it wasn't like the last time, where there was only one person at a table. Instead, it was an oversized long table, and Jiang Hai and the others sat on both sides of it. It could be seen that the people on both sides weren't very nice. Opposite Jiang Hai was Li Shihui, the representative he met today, 3 people he met at Qingwadai, and 3 women. A total of 8 people. On Jiang Hai's side, there was only Jiang Hai and Cheryl Li. After Azalina came back, she went to rest. She wasn't interested in these things. On the other hand, Cheryl Li liked to join in the fun. Therefore, she came along with Jiang Hai. Looking at the high officials in front of her, she was very proud. But at this time, the door of the Western restaurant was pushed open. 2 women she had seen before walked in reluctantly. Chapter 837. Oh. Our teenage years are here. Come, come, sit down, the dishes haven't been served yet. Seeing the 2 of them walk in, Li Shihui couldn't help but smile and say. Speaking of which, he was really grateful to these 2 girls. If it weren't for them, then he would have suffered a terrible loss, and his family would have to pay for it. It was just that they sacrificed a little, and he had to pay $10 million instead of $100 million. This was 10 times the difference, $10 million. Although this was not a small sum of money, he could still afford it. Department head Li, we have already done what we should do, what else do you want us to do? But after hearing his words, Lin Yun, did not sit down as he said, but still stood at the door and looked at Li Shihuai angrily. Hearing her words that were 70% sarcastic and 30% angry, the atmosphere in the whole room instantly stagnated. What do you mean by this? Hearing her words, Li Shihuai's face also became ugly, and he looked at the two people in front of him with an unhappy face. At the same time, he tore off the cloth that had been wrapped around his collar and said with a cold face. What do you mean? It's the meaning behind your words. What do you think we are? Do you think we are people who can come and go as you wish? When did we become your playthings? Yuni, don't stop me, I want to make it clear today. Yes, you won't let us have a good time. Do you think we will let you have a good time? At most, we'll fight to the death and go our separate ways. Hearing Li Shihuai's words, Lin Yun couldn't help but curse, probably because of what happened that day. Hearing her words, Li Shihuai's face became darker and darker. If word got out that he threatened popular female celebrities to drink and sleep with them, then this political scandal was enough for the higher-ups of South Korea to drag him down. To be able to sit in this position, it could be said that he must have made a lot of enemies. If he went down, he could indeed destroy these two families, but he would really be finished. In the eyes of these people, his life was much more precious than these female celebrities. What equality! This sentence was just for show. If a poor person committed a murder, even if it was a manslaughter, they would have to stay in prison for more than 10 years. However, if it was a rich person, even if it was a murder, they wouldn't even have to go to prison. Since ancient times, all crows in the world were equally black. This was also an unchanging truth. Just like what the Westerners said, everyone had the 7 deadly sins in their bones. This was also the nature of human beings. Lust, unless they had some special hobby or were congenitally deficient, who wouldn't like this kind of thing? Just like Jiang Hai, he admitted that he had a strong desire in that aspect. Gluttony, in Dante's Divine Comedy, was also called coveting pleasure. Who wouldn't covet such things? He could clearly live happily, so why would he have to tire himself out like a grandson? Jiang Hai was such a person. Greed. Needless to say, how many people in this world didn't love money? Laziness. There was nothing much to say about this. On Monday morning, who would be willing to get up, whether it was to go to class or go to school? If it weren't for the need to earn money to eat, it was estimated that many people would choose to lie at home, sleep until they woke up naturally, and count money until their hands cramped. Although this wasn't a positive thing, this was the essence of human nature. Anger. Anyone would be angry. In Buddhism, people would be angry. Jesus slapped the left side of the face and slapped the right side of the face. This wasn't something a normal person would do. Jealousy. Because the other party was better than oneself, whether it was a good job, more money, a beautiful girlfriend, or a good family. These were all jealousy. Who could pat their own mouth and say that they weren't jealous? Arrogance. This depended on the face. If one was good-looking, it was called arrogant. If one wasn't good-looking, it was called pretentious. Lust, gluttony, greed, laziness, anger, jealousy, and arrogance. These were the 7 deadly sins, but in fact, these were the most fundamental things of human nature. Li Shihuai was naturally not a saint. He had all these things. In his opinion, Lin Yun, and the others sacrificed themselves to accompany Jiang Hai. That was their blessing. It was what they deserved. He just leaked a little from his fingers, and it was enough to give them alms. Yes, it was alms, not compensation. This was the reality. People at their level would not bow their heads to these inferior people. But now Lin Yun said such words. How could he not be angry? Who do you think you are? You are not just an artist. You are called a star. What do you think you are? Don't you know it in your heart? Isn't your role to entertain the public? What's the difference between being coquettish on the stage and being coquettish off the stage? Looking at Lin Yun, Li Shihuai also stood up and said angrily. You bastard! Hearing Li Shihuai's words, Lin Yun, and Kim Taeyin almost couldn't stand it at the same time. But in fact, for Jiang Hai, these words didn't seem to be wrong. After all, in the ancient times of China, celebrities were the highest class of people. Well, let's change it to a more elegant word. But their job was still the same. So, he didn't really care about celebrities. Moreover, he also heard that there were quite a lot of celebrities in South Korea who were engaged in this kind of work. After all, South Korea itself was not big, and the celebrities had fewer ways to make money. So, when these two people, well, now Jiang Hai still didn't know their names. When these two people entered his room, he didn't have anything to worry about. But now, looking at the situation, they didn't seem to be willing. Although Jiang Hai was a bad person, he didn't seem to have forced others to do anything. Hey, don't hurt them. Now, seeing that Kim Taeyin and Lin Yun, were about to rush over like crazy, the three people over there also stood up for the first time. These three people were the people who came to negotiate and also the people who protected these two. Seeing the two women rushing over here, they also stood up. Jiang Hai saw their movements and knew that these three people also had a background, so he immediately shouted loudly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the three people restrained themselves and only grabbed the hands of the two people in an instant. Seeing that they really couldn't get close to these people, the two people couldn't help but secretly snort. After glaring at Jiang Hai, they turned and left here. Watching them leave, Li Shihuai, who was still in shock, still had a face of lingering fear. These two guys, this is not over. Looking at the two people who went out, Li Shihuai said with a face of anger. Hearing Li Shihuai's words in front of him, Jiang Hai gently knocked on the table and said slowly, this matter ends here. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that South Korea can receive 900,000 tons of fodder. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Li Shihuai's face also changed, then he stood up and nodded seriously. Glancing at him, Jiang Hai thought for a while. He felt that it was a little inappropriate to let these two girls go out like this. Moreover, after such a commotion, he was not in the mood to eat, so he stood up and asked Cheryl to go back to the room first, then he walked out by himself. When he walked out of the hotel, he happened to see Lin Yun, sitting on the steps in front of the hotel, crying sadly. Seeing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little overwhelmed. To be honest, Jiang Hai didn't regret what he did the night before. But making a woman cry like this, Jiang Hai was a little embarrassed. After thinking for a while, he still walked over. Seeing Jiang Hai walking over, Kim Taeyin and Lin Yun both stopped crying and looked at Jiang Hai with an unfriendly face. Do you need me to say anything now? Looking at the two people in front of him, Jiang Hai said hesitantly. He was indeed a little hesitant because he didn't know what to say. It was impossible for him to admit his mistake. Moreover, he didn't think that he had done anything wrong. These two people came into his house because of Li Shihuai's plane. Logically speaking, he had already contacted the South Korea government and didn't let Li Shihuai's family die, so he was even. But now looking at them crying here, Jiang Hai really didn't know what to say. There's no need for that. To people like us, aren't you all always high and mighty? What can we ask you to say? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Kim Taeyin's eyes were a little cold, and then she said with a serious face. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai was even more embarrassed. He really wanted to stand up and go back, but after thinking about it, it seemed that this was not very good. Looking around, Jiang Hai waved to the waiter over there, and then said something. In less than a minute, a bunch of keys appeared in Jiang Hai's hand. Jiang Hai didn't know whether to laugh or cry, he just wanted to borrow a car, but this kid seemed to be very helpful. He directly gave Jiang Hai a Rolls-Royce. Jiang Hai glanced at the car and then went to the parking lot. Not long after, a Rolls-Royce stopped in front of the two. "Come on in. Although I can't call out your names now, you are public figures after all. If you are photographed sitting here crying, it will probably affect your career. I'll take you home." Looking at the two people in front of him, Jiang Hai said to them. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Kim Taeyen couldn't help but hesitate. After all, there was a grudge between them and Jiang Hai. "Let's go. It's a waste if we don't take it. I've already been, what is there to be afraid of?" But Lin Yun seemed to be going all out. She wiped her tears and then directly pulled Kim Taeyen into the back seat of the car. After closing the door, Jiang Hai also shrugged. He was really looking for something to do. But since he had already said it, he was embarrassed to go back like this. He could only start the engine and drive forward. But they didn't notice that when the car drove away, a few lights flashed in the grass in the distance. Chapter 838. Have we arrived? Looking at Jean Taeyen, who ordered him to stop, Jiang Hai asked the two people in the back seat with some doubts. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two people also looked at him. They didn't say anything and just stared at him, making Jiang Hai feel a little embarrassed. As mentioned before, Jiang Hai is not a saint, but he is not a heartless person. Now seeing them in so much pain and struggling, to be honest, he is a little embarrassed. We haven't arrived yet, say something." Seeing that the two of them didn't speak, Jiang Hai couldn't help but scratch his head, then said helplessly. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the two of them also took a deep breath. "Don't think that we will thank you and forgive you just because you sent us back." Looking at Jiang Hai, Jean Taeyen thought for a while and said first. In fact, her thoughts about Jiang Hai are indeed a little strange, but even if Jiang Hai pretends to be a good person now, he can't get their forgiveness. After all, Jiang Hai did such an excessive thing to them. To be honest, I don't need your words of gratitude and forgiveness, because to a certain extent, I don't owe you anything. After all, I have done what I promised you." Hearing what Jean Taeyen said, Jiang Hai shrugged. He has always been a donkey that goes with the flow. If you go against him, there will be no good result. "You bastard! Then why did you send us back, bastard?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Lin Yun couldn't help but shout loudly. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai shrugged lightly. "Maybe I suddenly owed you, but whether you are grateful to me or not, whether you forgive me or not, it doesn't matter to me because I will probably leave South Korea the day after tomorrow, and then I probably won't be able to come back in this life." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also shrugged. To be honest, there is really nothing for Jiang Hai to miss in South Korea. You scum." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two couldn't help but be stunned. Then Kim Taeyen opened the door, said something to Jiang Hai, and left with Lin Yun. After getting out of the car, the two seemed to be afraid that Jiang Hai would follow them. They ran directly into the darkness. Jiang Hai looked at their backs and couldn't help but curl his lips. Scum? Is there a scum like me? It seems that I am indeed quite a scum. Forget it, scum is scum. But this nickname is a little unfair. After all, I haven't done anything too scum. Looking at the two disappearing, Jiang Hai curled his lips and sat in the driver's seat self-deprecatingly. Looking at the night scenery outside, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile helplessly. I didn't even have dinner. I will eat after going back to the hotel. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai was about to start the engine and go back, but just as he was about to leave, the door of the villa in front of him suddenly opened. Then a young woman in casual clothes walked out with some garbage and threw it into the trash can on the roadside, waiting for the garbage truck to take it away tomorrow. Looking at this young woman, Jiang Hai suddenly froze. Because this woman, he actually knew her. Scum? Then let's see what scum do. Recalling the words of the two people just now, Jiang Hai's mouth couldn't help but curl up. Then he got out of the car and slowly walked to the front of the villa. After the young woman just threw the garbage, she had already gone back. Jiang Hai walked to the front of the villa, picked up the phone, and dialed the number on it. Dudu, Yamasayo, hello? Maybe. After the phone rang twice, a female voice came from the other side of the phone. Listening to this familiar female voice, Jiang Hai also chuckled. It's me. Facing the female voice on the phone, Jiang Hai said very plainly. I know, what's the matter? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the female voice on the other side was obviously anxious. She lowered her voice and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled. It seems that she is very afraid of me. Ah, I suddenly have something to tell you. Can you please open the door? Listening to the voice on the other side of the phone, Jiang Hai said with a smile, and hearing what Jiang Hai said, the woman was clearly stunned. What do you mean? After thinking about it, she asked Jiang Hai directly. It means literally, I'm outside your house. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also chuckled and said. Bang! After Jiang Hai said this, the female voice on the other side also hung up the phone instantly. After waiting for about 10 seconds, the door opened. In front of Jiang Hai, a frightened face appeared. The owner of the face is called Han Jiaran. Why are you here? Did you investigate me, or did you follow me? No matter what the reason is, please leave immediately, my husband is at home. Looking at Jiang Hai, Han Jiaran said to him in a trembling voice. At the same time, she lowered her voice for fear of being heard by others, and her eyes were full of panic. Don't be too nervous, I just happened to pass by here and saw you taking out the trash. I don't have any malice, I'm just a little hungry, so I came to find something to eat. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai smiled and shrugged at her. You just want to eat? Hearing Jiang Hai's shameless remarks, Han Jiaran really didn't know what to say, but she didn't dare to be too excited to anger Jiang Hai or attract other people, so she could only ask while gritting her teeth. Of course. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also nodded and said to her with a smile. Then, come in. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, she glanced back upstairs, then said softly. Then she stepped aside and let Jiang Hai in. After Jiang Hai came in, he didn't make any sound. After changing his shoes, he looked at this small villa. He has to admit that this small villa is really exquisite, it has a homey feeling. Where are your husband and child? Looking at Han Jiaran who came back, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. My husband drank and is sleeping upstairs, the child is with my mother. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Han Jiaran also lowered her voice and said to Jiang Hai, then she didn't give him any face and went straight into the kitchen. And Jiang Hai looked at her, touched his chin, then followed her into the kitchen. There are only ramen and rice cakes, can I cook ramen with rice cakes? Seeing Jiang Hai come in, Han Jiaran, who opened the refrigerator door and looked around, raised her head, holding 2 packs of shinramen and a box of rice cakes in her hand, and asked Jiang Hai. Yes. Jiang Hai never liked to eat instant noodles, but now is not the time to be picky, so he said with a smile. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Han Jiaran also began to cook. As for Jiang Hai, he was looking at this small villa. There are 3 rooms on the first floor of the small villa, one of them is a large bathroom, and the other one should be a children's room, because the floor of the room is made of foam, with English letters and some patterns on it, making it convenient for children to crawl on it. The other room should be the reception room, and in addition, there is the kitchen. At the same time, Jiang Hai also came upstairs quietly. There are 3 rooms upstairs, but they are all occupied. Among them, a man is sleeping in the largest bedroom at this time. This man has a big nose and single eyelids. He is not handsome, but he is a little handsome, at least in Jiang Hai's eyes. He is very ordinary. It seems that this person should be Han Jiaren's husband. Why are you here? Just when Jiang Hai saw her husband there, Han Jiaren suddenly appeared behind Jiang Hai, then pulled Jiang Hai's clothes, and whispered nervously and fearfully. Come and see my enemy. Looking at Han Jiaren's appearance, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. Suddenly, he wanted to tease her. After saying this, he directly pulled her into his arms, then lowered his head and kissed her. When Han Jiaren was attacked by Jiang Hai, her first thought was to struggle away, but after struggling for a while, she saw her husband through the gap of the door. Her struggling suddenly stopped, because she was afraid that if she moved too much, she would wake her husband up. She could only stand there stiffly, and let Jiang Hai attack her. And soon, Jiang Hai was not satisfied with just the lips, and his hands began to attack her. Feeling Jiang Hai's movements, Han Jiaren's shame, fear, she actually had a trace of feeling that she should not have, and her legs unconsciously clamped together. Feeling her movements, Jiang Hai's hand also slid down, but at this time, Han Jiaren suddenly pushed Jiang Hai away. Do you still want to eat noodles? If not, then leave. Looking at Jiang Hai, she panted and said to him angrily. Eat, of course, not only do I want to eat noodles, I also want to eat you. Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai leaned over and said to her. You rogue, you bastard. No, not here. Feeling Jiang Hai leaning over again, Han Jiaren was also embarrassed and angry, but she found that it was impossible to point at Jiang Hai's conscience now, so she could only grit her teeth and say to Jiang Hai. After hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled. If it can't be here, it proves that it can be somewhere else. Jiang Hai has never been a good person, he is also very sure of this. Now that the arrow is on the bow, he has to shoot, how can he be polite? He picked up Han Jiaren, quickly went to the first floor, and entered the empty children's room. At this time, Han Jiaren's husband, who was sleeping upstairs, frowned slightly. He seemed to feel something in his sleep. Chapter 839. Hello, Jiang Hai, what are you doing? Listening to the voice on the other side of the phone, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. A few years ago, this voice was more familiar to Jiang Hai than Qi Li because the owner of the voice was also one of his best friends, Su Wei. I'm in South Korea. I'm here to talk about some things. What's the matter? Hearing Su Wei's familiar voice, Jiang Hai asked him. He hadn't seen Su Wei for more than half a year. During the new year, he went back and played with them. After that, Su Wei stayed in the United States and didn't go back for a while. Xiang Hua's wife is about to give birth. Do you know? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Su Wei also said to Xiang Hua. Oh, I heard about it. Is she about to give birth? When Jiang Hai returned to China, Xiang Hua's wife was confirmed to be pregnant. Now that he thought about it, the expected date of birth seemed to be in the near future. Well, he was too embarrassed to ask if you were coming back, so I called you to ask. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Su Wei couldn't help but smile and say. Indeed, this matter was not like a wedding. This gift couldn't be avoided. If he called to give birth to a child, it would be like asking for a gift, so Xiang Hua was too embarrassed. Of course, in fact, even if Jiang Hai knew about it, the gift would not be too expensive. First, Jiang Hai was not a spendthrift. Money and other things were given for free. For example, when others got married, he gave 100,000 yuan. If he had something to do, others would give 500 yuan back. Jiang Hai didn't care. He was not such a person. Second, they didn't pay attention to this. They paid attention to the number of gifts they gave, and all their friends gave the same number of gifts. Whether you have money or not, the gifts are the same. Everyone has to live by themselves. People can't expect others to live. Therefore, when Jiang Hai's buddies got married, Jiang Hai always gave them the same amount of money. He didn't pretend to be rich, and when he was really suffering, he didn't borrow a single cent from his buddies. This was the dignity of a human being. As long as he could endure and cross this hurdle, he would not open his mouth. That was the kind of person he was. If someone was here, he would say it out loud. How could he still be considered a good friend if he made such a clear distinction? Jiang Hai wanted to say that it was precisely because they were good friends that they had to separate things clearly. Of course, it depended on what it was. For example, if you went out to eat or play, it didn't matter who had more money. But if you were borrowing money, since you were good friends, you had to think for the other party. If he lent you money, would his family be unwilling to accept it? Definitely. No matter if it was his parents or his wife, they would definitely say something. Since borrowing money from others is a burden to his family, why should he borrow money from others? Therefore, unless Jiang Hai said that someone in his family was going to have an operation tomorrow and he didn't have enough money, he wouldn't borrow money from others even if he were to sell his house and land. His friends were basically in the same way. Go back, when? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai calculated in his heart and asked him. Go back, when? About this half a month? After thinking for a while, Su Wei said with uncertainty. It should be fine. After I finish my business in South Korea, I will also go back to China. I will make a trip back to Bing City then. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai said to Su Wei with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Su Wei also responded. Then the two chatted for a while and hung up the phone. After watching Jiang Hai hang up the phone, the people on the other side came over. What's the matter? Looking at Jiang Hai, Li Shihuai said to him with a smile. Nothing. Whose turn is it? Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai also smiled and said to him. It's your turn. I'm on the green. Looking at Jiang Hai, Li Shihuai also said with a smile. Last night, after he had a meal at Han Jia's house, he went back to the hotel. Just after he came back, Cheryl Li told him that because he didn't have a good dinner today, Li Shihuai invited Jiang Hai to go out to play in their own name tomorrow. He asked Jiang Hai what he wanted to play, whether it was golf or fishing. To be honest, rich people only did that sort of thing. Fishing in the sea, playing golf, riding a horse, and so on. There are many horses in Jiang Hai's manor, and he also has a Shire horse. Going to sea? He is about to vomit from sitting on a boat. So there is nothing fun about going to sea. As for playing golf, Jiang Hai has never played before, so he agreed to go and have a look. Early this morning, after Jiang Hai had breakfast, he took Cheryl Li and Azalina to a car arranged by Li Shihuai and went to a golf course near Seoul. After Jiang Hai tried out how to hit the ball, they went straight to the actual practice. Playing golf is not as simple as imagined. It is really difficult for people who have never practiced to hit that small ball. Moreover, it is not easy to control the strength. At the same time, there are quite a lot of golf clubs. Jiang Hai has never played this before, so he is not clear about it. Fortunately, Li Shihuai is a person who often plays this kind of thing. So under his guidance, Jiang Hai slowly figured out some tricks. At the same time, he directly bought a set. It is definitely the top club in South Korea. In the future, he can play by himself when he has nothing to do. While he was on the phone, Su Wei called him. After Jiang Hai picked up the call, he continued to make calls. Originally, Jiang Hai planned to come to South Korea for 3 to 5 days. After solving the matter, he will not return to the United States directly. Instead, he will go to the capital first. After all, he and Chile have not seen each other for a while. This time, he is so close to South Korea. If he does not go and see her, Jiang Hai will not know what to say. So, he decided to go back and see her first. As for Hua Hua's child, he can also go and see him on the way. Anyway, from his point of view, he has nothing to do at the moment. The cattle in the manor have been bought. The cattle and fish are all on the right track. There is nothing for him to worry about. The only thing he is concerned about now are only 2 points. One is the Native American treasure, and the other is the person who may be related to the dragon badge. It is not too late to return to the United States when there is news about either of these 2 things. As for Li Shihuai, although he also knows that it is unlikely to negotiate with Jiang Hai again, before Jiang Hai leaves, it does not prevent him from building a relationship with Jiang Hai. As long as his relationship with Jiang Hai is in place, if there is anything in the future, he can be considered someone who can speak for him. He has to admit that this guy's vision is very accurate. While Jiang Hai and Li Shihuai are playing golf, the entertainment industry of South Korea is in an earthquake at this time. The source of the earthquake is naturally Girls' Generation. Last night, the photo of Lin Yun and Kim Tae-in sitting in front of the Shilla Hotel crying was taken quite clearly. Then, the photo of them getting into a Rolls-Royce was also quite clear. Although the photo of Jiang Hai is not taken clearly, this photo is quite shocking. Although Girls' Generation is not as popular as it was a few years ago, it is still considered a national girl group after all. 2 very famous members getting into a person's car at this time, to be honest, it would be strange if it is not shocked. There is no Weibo in South Korea. The main social network is called Sawonet, and there is also Twitter and Facebook, collectively known as SNS. At this time, on SNS, it is extremely shocking. In addition, in the Orthodox entertainment news, this news is also constantly attracting the attention of the public. In the midst of this storm, the company that the 2 of them were in first issued a statement, saying that the 2 of them appeared at the Shilla Hotel last night because the 2 of them were going to star in a show. Because of the resources, they could choose any show they wanted. Then, perhaps because they did not have a good relationship, they lost control and cried. The person who drove the car and locked them up is a good friend of the 2. If there is any gossip, it would not be so blatant. After reading the management company's words, those who were originally shocked quieted down a little. In the eyes of these people, it is just like what the management company said. If there is really any relationship announcement, it should be with 1 person, not 2 people. There are also people who directly think that this might be the management company's hype. Other than these people who know but will not say it, or will not think this way at all, there are also some people who know something but will not say it. For example, Li Shengji. When he saw the 2 women at the Shilla Hotel the day before yesterday, his 6th sense told him that he had been cheated on. Therefore, he frantically called Lin Yun's phone number, wanting to know why, or he wanted to have a clear answer. Unfortunately, after calling for 2 days, he still could not beat her. When he went to the company to look for her, she was not at the company. When he went to wait for her outside her house, she did not go home. This made him quite angry, but as an artist, he also had his own reasons. Although he felt that his heart was about to explode, he still had to attend an event today. Actually, rather than an event, it would be better to call it a party because the person who organized this event was the 4th generation of the Li family. In order to show his positive image, every year, this person would come out to find some celebrities, donate money, do shows, and so on. There were no reporters filming, but it would be published in the newspapers. This was also positive news, so he would not let it go. Chapter 840. Hey, Shengji, here. Li Shengji had just arrived at the gathering place in his van, a golf course near Seoul. Many people looked at him, and he quickly sorted out his mood in the car, and then walked out of the car with a smile. As soon as he got out of the car, someone shouted at him. Hearing the owner of this voice, Li Shengji also looked at the other party, and then the smile on his face became bigger, but there was a trace of disgust in his eyes. He also knew the person who came over. His name is MC Meng. He used to be second to none in South Korea's hip-hop industry, but South Korea had military service. He once escaped the military service, and after he came back, the public didn't buy it very much. So he has always hoped to enter people's eyes through some activities. Li Shengji and him were related mainly because they were both hosts of 2 Days and 1 Night. But to be honest, the currently popular Li Shengji didn't really like this older brother of his. But on the surface, they still had to maintain harmony. "Brother, you came so early." Looking at MC Meng who came over, Li Shengji also said politely. "Hey, I have nothing to do anyway, so I came over to take a look first, but today, there are really a lot of seniors and actors. You can help to introduce them later." Hearing Li Shengji's words, MC Meng said with a smile. Hearing what he said, although Li Shengji was smiling on his face, he was sneering in his heart. The two of them slowly walked into the golf club as if they were really familiar with each other. Li Shengji couldn't help but nod his head when he saw it. He was indeed worthy of being the legitimate heir of the 3-star Li family. His charisma was far from what ordinary people could compare to. There are a lot of artists who were invited like Li Shengji. Even Han Jia, who had just given birth a while ago and had not yet returned, came with her husband. Everyone was wearing golf clothes at this time, and they were chatting. The most dazzling person in the crowd was naturally today's host, Li Zhihao. Seeing Li Shengji coming, Li Zhihao also greeted him with a smile. "Shengji is here." Looking at Li Shengji, Li Zhihao smiled and said. In fact, the relationship between the two was very good. Of course, Li Shengji didn't have the qualifications to be a good friend of the 3-star crown prince. They had a good relationship, but no one knew why. Perhaps it was because they hit it off, or perhaps it was because, after knowing who Li Shengji's girlfriend was, Li Zhihao felt that he would definitely make friends with this person. "Mr. Li," hearing his words, Li Shengji immediately said with a smile on his face. MC Meng next to him, after seeing his appearance and Li Zhihao, didn't know what to say. After all, he was eager to get close to such a person, but he couldn't say anything to such a person. He could only look at Li Shengji. Li Shengji nodded. However, it was obvious that Li Shengji had no intention of introducing this person to his brother. "I saw the news yesterday. Is there anything wrong?" Looking at Li Shengji, Li Zhihao asked with concern. As for why he cared so much, no one knew. Perhaps it was just a form of concern. "There's nothing wrong. I just went to the audition, but the result was not ideal." He naturally knew what Li Zhihao was talking about, but now he couldn't say anything else. He could only respond with a smile. Hearing his words, Li Zhihao also smiled. However, just as they were about to say something, some people suddenly came in from outside. Seeing these people coming in, many people in the hall looked at them, and the people over there also looked at them. When their eyes met, many people's faces showed a trace of expression, but they concealed it very well. For example, Li Shengji saw 2 people he was very familiar with among those people, Jiang Hai and Li Shihuai. At the same time, in the crowd, Han Jia also saw Jiang Hai and remembered what had happened last night and the night before. Her gaze was somewhat evasive, but she knew that this was not the time to panic. After all, her husband was still by her side, so she forcibly suppressed her desire to avoid his gaze and looked elsewhere. Li Zhihao also looked at Jiang Hai, because he also knew Jiang Hai. He didn't know if anyone had any impression of him. Jiang Hai and Li Zhihao once had a feud. The reason for their feud was in Atlantic City. When Jiang Hai went to look for Du Feynman Do Feynman happen to be playing cards there? Li Zhihao was one of them, and he took a fancy to Prawalton. Some unpleasant things happened between him and Jiang Hai, but after returning, he was warned not to cause trouble for Jiang Hai. However, at this time, when he saw Jiang Hai here, he couldn't help but squint his eyes, but he soon gave up. It was impossible for him not to know that Jiang Hai was here, and the reason why he didn't dare to do anything was because he knew that he couldn't touch Jiang Hai now. Not to mention him, even his father couldn't touch Jiang Hai, because to some extent, Jiang Hai was now doing business with South Korea. If he made Jiang Hai unhappy, his family would also suffer losses. Therefore, he only glanced at Jiang Hai, then looked away. The people on both sides didn't seem to interfere with each other, and they just brushed past each other. Jiang Hai and Li Shihuai went to the balcony on the second floor together. They were going to rest there. Jiang Hai and the others came early this morning, and they had already played 2 rounds just now. To be honest, Jiang Hai was still fine, but Li Shihuai's physical strength was already a little exhausted. Jiang Hai wasn't particularly interested in this sport, so he suggested that they take a rest, and Li Shihuai naturally wouldn't disagree. This hall was one of the main halls of the golf club. The first floor was the hall, and people took a small battery-powered car to play golf. There was a place on the second floor for people who didn't know how to play, and for the women. Of course, there were also places to rest and eat. Jiang Hai. Looking at Jiang Hai going upstairs, although Li Shengji still had some headaches, he still remembered that he had offended Jiang Hai. Recently, because of his girlfriend's matter, he had forgotten about it. Now that he saw Jiang Hai, he remembered it. Shengji knows that guy? Hearing Li Shengji's words, Li Zhihao looked at him with some surprise. Although he and Li Shengji called each other brothers, he didn't think that Li Shengji was at the same level as himself. Although he didn't want to admit it, Jiang Hai was indeed at the same level as himself. Jiang Hai's pasture, beef, and fish were very popular in the world now. As the legitimate son of a Samsung, he was naturally very clear about it. So although he didn't want to admit it, Jiang Hai was indeed at the same level as him. This was not a lie. Oh, I don't know him, it's just. Does Mr. Li also know Jiang Hai? Hearing Li Zhihao's words, Li Shengji said a little awkwardly. Hearing his words, Li Zhihao also smiled. He had nothing to hide. I know that guy, but I have a grudge with that guy. Shrugging, he said to Li Shengji. Hearing what he said, Li Shengji's original intention of asking him for a referral disappeared. If there is a grudge, then it's better not to go over and make things worse. After a bright smile, he didn't say much. But during the break, he can go upstairs and talk to Jiang Hai, hoping that Jiang Hai can let him go. Okay, we should go play golf. Seeing that Li Shengji didn't talk anymore, Li Zhihao also said loudly. Then he clapped his hands, indicating that everyone was ready to go. Of course, they couldn't all go. A golf team will not have more than 4 people, most of them are 3 or 2. Even if it's not a serious game, the rules still have to be followed, so Li Zhihao only picked 3 people with better skills and some followers to play golf together. Those who were not selected could only go to the second floor. At most, they could only meet this Samsung's son. However, although they didn't have a relationship with Li Zhihao, since they came to play, they had to play. Thus, after going up to the second floor, everyone either gathered together to chat or swung their poles for fun. When these people went upstairs, Jiang Hai in the distance also noticed them. The place where Jiang Hai is now is the place to rest. After they sat down, Jia Lina took the tea leaves and cups that Jiang Hai brought to make tea. He didn't dare to drink anything in South Korea. Who knows if there will be any problems in it. Although it's not that these people in South Korea dared to do such a thing to him, it's better to be vigilant. After Jiang Hai's tea leaves were served, Li Shihuai was also shocked. The ethnic culture of South Korea was inherited from Wuxia. Naturally, they were also very interested in tea, but unfortunately, whether it was South Korea or another country with an inheritance, Japan, they didn't produce much tea. However, Japan played with matcha, so their tea ceremony was still quite famous in the world. As for the South Korea side, they really don't understand tea. However, those officials, especially the high-ranking officials, are bound to be cultured. Just like Li Shihui, he also drinks tea. However, his tea leaves, which are usually envied by others, are inferior to Jiang Hai's tea. Jiang Hai prefers West Lake Longjing, and these tea leaves were also planted by him. After brewing, the extremely unusual aroma instantly made Li Shihui lose his composure. Give Minister Li some tea leaves to try. Looking at his appearance, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. He has these things. Chapter 841. When he heard Jiang Hai's words, Li Shengji was dumbfounded. He suddenly thought of a possibility. Xinlua Hotel, his girlfriend, the crying figure that night, when Jiang Hai's car drove away, it was as if all these things had overlapped. When he thought of this, his brain was about to explode. What kind of F*King melodramatic scene was this? Wasn't this something that only appeared in those bloody NTR stories? Why did it appear in his body? When he thought of this, he felt that his breathing was not very smooth. His vision darkened and he was about to sit down, but fortunately, he held on. Now, he felt that there was a ball of fire burning in his mouth. His eyes instantly turned red. Now, his first thought was to take a knife and cut Jiang Hai and Lin Yun, this pair of B***stards. Especially Lin Yun, When she was with him, she made all kinds of excuses. What about acting on TV? It didn't count. What about being inexperienced? What about being unfamiliar? These were all nonsense. Could it be that the skills she learned on TV were all given to Jiang Hai? That B***tch, that B***starred. Li Shengji's whole body was trembling as he recalled Jiang Hai and Lin Yun's appearance. It was hard for him to imagine and accept this. He had been cuckolded. Thinking of this, he really had the urge to die. Fortunately, he was a very utilitarian person and was very open-minded. Li Shengji might not be good at other things, singing, dancing, and acting. After all, you couldn't ask an actor who didn't even have acting skills to sing well, right? But his plan for his life was really good, and it was also very strong. He belonged to the wolf type of person. As long as he was given a chance, he would succeed no matter what. He would not allow Jiang Hai to ruin his career, and that included Lin Yun. Therefore, he quickly took 2 deep breaths and suppressed the anger in his heart. He forcibly adjusted his expression and revealed a smile once again. Then, he walked back into the club, but he kept texting Lin Yun. Unfortunately, Lin Yun did not reply. But this time, he would not give up so easily. In fact, he already knew that Lin Yun was at Kim Tae-in's house. The reason why he didn't go to find her was, firstly, to avoid awkwardness, and secondly, to leave some face for both parties. But now, he had to go. After Li Zhihao returned, he told Li Zhihao that he was not feeling well and left. First, he went back to the company to get his car. After putting on a disguise, he drove to Kim Tae-yun's apartment. For a team like Girls' Generation, they naturally had their own dorm room. But to be honest, after they became popular a few years ago, almost no one lived in a dorm room anymore. After the 9 people became 8 people that year, the dormitory became even more deserted, so basically no one would stay in the dormitory. Unless it was very late at night and there was no place to stay, the dormitory would always be empty. And the company naturally couldn't take back the dormitory. This was also one of their privileges. Li Shengji drove to a roadside shop and bought some food casually. After eating lunch, Li Shengji drove to the gate of the community where Kim Tae-yun lived. He waited from noon to night until about 5:00 in the evening. When he couldn't wait any longer and was about to knock on Kim Tae-yun's door, the two figures appeared outside the community. Seeing that the two had finally appeared, Li Shengji breathed a sigh of relief. He immediately got out of the car and came to the two. Although the two were wrapped tightly and didn't have any makeup on, ordinary passers-by wouldn't be able to recognize them. However, Li Shengji was very familiar with one of them, so he stopped them in front of the two in a few steps. "Shengji, Appa." Seeing the person in front of her, Lin Yun was stunned for a moment, then she said somewhat woodenly. Kim Tae-yun looked at Li Shengji in front of her, but there was a trace of vigilance in her eyes. She knew very well that Li Shengji was very smart and very conceited. He should have guessed most of what happened that day, but she didn't know that he hadn't appeared in the past few days. But now that he appeared, it was destined to not be a good thing. She didn't want Lin Yun to get hurt again. Looking at the two in front of him, Li Shengji really didn't know what to say at this time. Looking at the innocent Lin Yun in front of him, he really wanted to go up and slap her, and then tell her, "You bitch, I already know about your scandal." But he resisted because he knew that if he said that, his career would be over. As long as Lin Yun didn't appear in front of Jiang Hai tonight, then Jiang Hai would call Li Shihuai and he would be completely finished. So now he had to beg this woman who made him a cuckold and beg her to save him. But there was really no way to say these words when they were at the tip of his tongue, especially when there was a woman beside him. "Shengji Appa, what's the matter?" Looking at the silent and extremely awkward atmosphere in front of her, Kim Tae-yun thought for a while and said to Li Shengji. Hearing her words, Li Shengji calmed down a little and smiled at her. "Tae-yen, can you let me talk to Yun alone?" Looking at Kim Tae-yun, Li Shengji asked her. Li Shengji was born in 1987, and Kim Tae-yun was born in 1989. The two also knew each other because of Lin Yun, so it didn't matter if they called each other by name. Hearing Li Shengji's words, Kim Tae-yun also looked at Lin Yun. "Oni, wait for me." Hearing Li Shengji's words, Lin Yun also calmed down. She had to face this matter eventually. Taking a deep breath, after Lin Yun persuaded Kim Tae-yun to leave, she motioned for Li Shengji to go to the side to talk. Then the two came to a corner on the side, and Kim Tae-yun stayed where she was. "Shengji Appa, I'm sorry." After walking to the corner, Lin Yun took a deep breath and spoke first. Indeed, she couldn't stay silent for such a matter. In her opinion, this was her choice. Yun, I understand. This matter is not entirely your responsibility." Lowering his head, Li Shengji suppressed his anger and said to Lin Yun with a smile on his face. Now he kept telling himself that absolutely, he couldn't get angry. "Appa." Hearing Li Shengji's words, Lin Yun's eyes suddenly turned red and she looked at Li Shengji gratefully. "You are Jiang Hai." Looking at Lin Yun's appearance, Li Shengji sighed and then slowly said. "You, how did you know?" Hearing what he said, Lin Yun was a little confused. It seemed that Li Shengji really knew. "A few days ago, because of a small matter, I accidentally offended him. He wanted to send Li Shihuai to ban me. You know Li Shihuai. He is a high-ranking person in South Korea. He is far from someone a small shrimp like me can afford to offend. So today, I went to beg him, but he told me that if I don't want to be banned, then I have to ask you to go to him." Li Shengji looked at Lin Yun. His face was a little ashamed, a little annoyed, and a little embarrassed. In fact, he really wanted to beat Lin Yun up and then fight with Jiang Hai, but he knew that he couldn't. He couldn't deny his efforts over the years just because of these two people. He was already 29 years old this year. He was no longer young. He didn't have so much time to fight, so he had to protect his current achievements. Appa, what do you mean by this? Originally, Lin Yun thought that she would get comfort and love from Li Shengji. If he could say something like, "Let's start over," she would really be moved to death. But this scene was not right. Why did he tell her that Jiang Hai was looking for her? What did this mean? Yun, can I trouble you with one thing? Hearing Lin Yun's trembling voice, Li Shengji also raised his head and looked at Lin Yun, as he said slowly. Hearing his words, Lin Yun's tears couldn't stop. At night, around 10:30 p.m., Jiang Hai slowly took the elevator back to his floor. The plane tomorrow was ready. Tomorrow, he would go to Wuxia alone, and Cheryl, Azalina, Galina, and Wallace would go back to the United States. Now that the matter in South Korea was over, Jiang Hai naturally had to go back to Wuxia to see Qi Li and the others. The three people there also had to go back to the United States. After Wallace went back, she would continue to control the news. Azalina and Galina had to go back to the manor to protect the safety of the girls. Everything had to be back on track. As for Jiang Hai's own safety, he didn't need to worry about it. Secondly, after he arrived at Wuxia, Du Ning and Qi Li would be there. Thinking of Du Ning and Qi Li, Jiang Hai hadn't seen them for a long time. Last time, Qi Li said that she would go back to find a manager and arrange the company. Then, she went to find Jiang Hai. This time, she was gone for several months, which made Jiang Hai a little depressed. But thinking about it, if she saw Qi Jia and Qia, it seemed that he would be even more depressed. Shaking his head, he didn't think about these things for the time being. He forced himself to be spirited, walked to the door of his room, opened the door, and walked in. But as soon as he walked in, he found that the atmosphere in the room was a bit wrong. Wallace and Galina, who stayed in the room, were looking at Jiang Hai with a funny face at this time. A figure was sitting on the sofa over there. Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, this figure also stood up and looked directly at Jiang Hai. "You really came. That Li Shengji is amazing. He can even invite you over like this." Looking at the woman standing in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled. "This Li Shengji is really good. His charm is really great. He can even invite people over like this, but she, who is she?" Chapter 842. Since you're here, let's go in. Looking at Lin Yuner in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled and walked into his room. Looking at Jiang Hai's actions, Lin Yuner also sighed. It seemed that tonight, this matter would not end well. But then she laughed at herself. This kind of thing, if it happened once, there would be a second time. And this time, it was the man she thought was the closest to her who pushed her into this pit of fire. Tightening her clothes, Lin Yuner walked into Jiang Hai's room. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of her, she closed her eyes. "I said that I won't force others to do anything. If you don't want to, you can leave at any time." Looking at her, Jiang Hai sat on the ground, looked at her, and said very plainly, "I only hope that after tonight, everything will return to its original state." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Lin Yuner spoke in strange English to Jiang Hai, but her eyes were full of determination. Then she took off her coat in front of Jiang Hai, revealing her perfect figure. "As you wish." Looking at Lin Yuner's serious look, Jiang Hai also smiled and walked over. There was no need to describe in detail what happened after that. That night, Lin Yuner didn't even know when she fell asleep. But to be honest, apart from the inner entanglement, she was still quite attached to Jiang Hai. That feeling of attacking her soul really made her unable to stop. When she woke up the next day, she was the only one left in the room. The traces of the existence of Jiang Hai and others had disappeared at this time. She only found Jiang Hai's business card beside her. At the same time, there was an address. She understood what Jiang Hai meant. This was to tell her that if there was anything in the future, she could call this number or go to this place. Although she really wanted to throw these two things away, Lin Yuner somehow stuffed these two things into her clothes. Then, she packed up and left the hotel. Looking at the rare sunlight outside, she didn't know if the matter had come to an end. In fact, it was indeed so. Since Lin Yuner had already come yesterday, Lin Yuner didn't know if it was the end of the matter. Jiang Hai couldn't hold on to an artist, so when he left this morning, he called Li Shihuai and told him that Li Shengji didn't have to target him anymore. It was best to take care of Lin Yuner and Kim Taeyin. In order to thank him for his help, Jiang Hai added 10 tons and 100 tons of fodder to the annual 90 tons of Southern Gaoli. Of course, he didn't add this thing because he had slept with a few girls here. It was because he originally wanted to sell these. This could be considered as taking a step back in order to advance. Unfortunately, the people of Southern Gaoli were still cheering for this. When they arrived at the Incheon airport, Azalina, Galina, Hua Lizi, Cheryl, as well as the staff and 2 bodyguards, boarded the plane that Jiang Hai had specially rented. He was already thinking about whether he should get a plane for himself. But even if he had such thoughts, he would have to wait until he returned to the United States. After watching everyone leave, he bought a first-class ticket and flew directly from Southern Gaoli to the capital of Wuxia. Southern Gaoli wasn't far from Wuxia. At least, it was much closer than flying to the United States. Jiang Hai seemed to have just sat on the plane for a while, and the plane had already informed him that it was about to land. After waiting for a while, the plane landed at the capital airport. Jiang Hai carried his luggage, a backpack, and walked out of the airport special passage. Jiang Hai didn't like to take too many things with him when he went out. In his backpack, there was only a set of clothes, a few pairs of underwear, and a mobile phone charger. That was all, so a small backpack could fit everything. If he needed something, he would spend money to buy it. In any case, he had plenty of money now. After leaving the capital airport, Jiang Hai took a taxi and went directly to the Chi Li group. After waiting for a while, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at this huge building. To be honest, this seemed to be the first time Jiang Hai came to Chi Li's company. In the past, he had only seen it in some photos at most. Now it seemed that this Chi group was really terrifying. Unlike ordinary companies that rented office buildings, the Chi group itself occupied a huge office building. There was only one company in the whole building, the Chi group. This building was built by Chi Li's father. The location was a little remote, not in the second ring road, but on the side of the third ring road. When building this building, the Chi group spent a lot of money to approve the land and construction. This was also the building of the Chi group at its peak. This building was worth 10 billion yuan, of course, in RMB. Although this building wasn't very tall, it was really a feeling to see such a building here. After getting out of the car, Jiang Hai looked at the huge building in front of him and clicked his tongue. Thinking about himself in the past, it seemed that he really didn't match Chi Li very well. But now, Jiang Hai could afford such a building. After sorting out his backpack, Jiang Hai walked towards the Chi group building in front of him and came to the front desk. At this time, no one knew who Jiang Hai was, so basically everyone turned a blind eye to Jiang Hai. "Hello, how can I help you?" Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, a beautiful girl at the front desk here asked Jiang Hai with some doubts. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also came over. "Sorry to trouble you, I'm looking for Chi Li." Looking at the girl, Jiang Hai said to her with a smile. "Looking for President Chi? Do you have an appointment?" Hearing that Jiang Hai was looking for Chi Li, the receptionist here was stunned for a moment, then asked Jiang Hai with some doubts. With her memory, she didn't seem to have seen Jiang Hai before. "No, I'll have to trouble you to make a phone call. My name is Jiang Hai." Hearing the receptionist's words, Jiang Hai also smiled and said to her. Maybe because Jiang Hai's attitude was good, the receptionist didn't avoid Jiang Hai and directly called Qi Li's office with an internal phone. Since Zheng Jin left, Qi Li's assistants became two. One is Du Ning, and the other is a promoted person, but whether it is Du Ning or this person, they all know Jiang Hai. After learning that Jiang Hai came, Du Ning immediately told the news to Qi Li. Jiang Hai is here? A few days ago, Jiang Hai said that he would come to see her, but he didn't say the specific time. Now that he suddenly appeared in the building, even Qi Li was stunned. Then a smile quickly flashed on her face. She stopped reading the documents and jumped out of the office. She took her exclusive elevator and went directly to the first floor. After getting off the elevator, she saw Jiang Hai standing not far from the front desk playing with his mobile phone. She couldn't help but speed up her pace. Before Jiang Hai could react, a pair of small hands covered Jiang Hai's eyes. Guess who I am? Looking at Jiang Hai, who was stunned for a moment, Qi Li deliberately changed her voice and asked Jiang Hai. Who else can it be? Qi Li. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai was also stunned for a moment. If he was a veteran in love now, he would definitely tease Qi Li, but unfortunately, Jiang Hai really didn't feel anything about this, so he just said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's unromantic words, Qi Li still didn't care and let go of her hand with a smile. Then with a smile on her face, she hugged Jiang Hai happily, and Jiang Hai turned around and touched her hair. Seeing the scene in front of them, to be honest, the glasses of the whole company almost fell off. Qi Li had always been known as the cold-faced queen in the company. She had the capital to be arrogant, young, beautiful, and powerful. If she wasn't arrogant, who would be arrogant? But such a queen-like woman was quite popular with modern men. Although they heard that Qi Li was married, few people in the company had seen Jiang Hai, so many of them secretly fantasized about Qi Li. But now, Jiang Hai and Qi Li's actions had completely oppressed these people. Regardless of whether they were men or women, they were all stunned at this time. The men came because their dreams were broken, and the women were simply surprised because they had never seen such a smiling Qi Li. At the same time, they also became interested in this man who could make Qi Li put down her pride. At this time, Qi Li only had eyes for Jiang Hai. She didn't care about showing affection to Jiang Hai in front of others. Why didn't you tell me you were back? I could have picked you up. Let's go upstairs and rest first. Qi Li naturally held Jiang Hai's arm, and walked with Jiang Hai to the elevator in the distance. When she walked, she almost put all her weight on Jiang Hai. In other people's words, she seemed to be glued to Jiang Hai. The queen they liked in the past showed another side of herself at this time, an even more charming side, but unfortunately, it was not for them. I want to give you a surprise. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai also smiled, and then followed her into the elevator. As the elevator door closed, the people outside were still speechless for a long time. It was because today's scene had shocked them too much. But in the company, many WeChat groups and QQ groups exploded not long after. For the Qi family, this was a big event. However, while everyone was concerned about the gossip and the real identity of Jiang Hai, some people who already knew who Jiang Hai was frowned because for them, Jiang Hai's high-profile visit to the Qi family this time was still unknown whether it was a blessing or a curse. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.